I am just a chronicler and welcome you to another video. Since I know many of you watch to relax and fall asleep, I thought it would be nice if you left a comment telling me where you're listening from and if it's raining there. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the episodes. Now, it's time to get comfortable, relax, and begin. The smell of mold hit me first. Brother Gerard handed me the iron key and pointed down the narrow stone staircase. The archives are yours now, Brother Thomas. May God be with you. His footsteps echoed away, leaving me alone at the entrance to the underground chambers of the Templar fortress in Acre. I held my oil lamp ahead of me and descended. Each step creaked under my weight. The air grew colder. My lamp cast dancing shadows on the damp walls. 23 steps down, I reached the heavy wooden door. The key turned with a grinding sound. The archive room stretched before me. Wooden shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Scrolls and codices filled every space. Dust covered everything. The air felt thick and stale. My job was simple: catalog every document in these chambers. The task would take months. I set up my work area at a solid oak table near the entrance. The surface was scarred from years of use. I placed my writing materials carefully. Fresh parchment, 3 quills, 2 pots of ink. A stone wall shelf held my lamp. The first scroll I picked was bound with red thread. The parchment felt brittle under my fingers. I unrolled it carefully. The Latin text was clear, written in a steady hand. Standard monastery records, grain purchases, wine stores, nothing unusual. I made my notes methodically: title, date, contents, condition, shelf, location. My quill scratched against the fresh parchment. The work was slow but satisfying. 3 hours passed. My back ached from hunching over the texts. I reached for another scroll, this one bound in black leather. The writing was different, tighter, more urgent. Something caught my eye on the third line. A symbol I'd never seen before. 3 interlocking circles with a vertical line through the center. I copied the symbol into my notes. My hand shook slightly as I drew it. The shape felt wrong somehow. My eyes kept being drawn back to it. I forced myself to continue reading. More monastery records, but from an outpost I'd never heard of. The bell rang for evening prayers. I rolled the scroll carefully and returned it to its shelf. My neck felt stiff. My eyes burned from straining in the dim light. I climbed the stairs slowly, legs heavy from sitting all day. That night, I dreamed of the symbol. It floated in darkness, spinning slowly. I woke up, sweating. The dream felt vivid, real. I could still see the symbol when I closed my eyes. The next day, I found the symbol again. Different scroll. Different hand, same 3 circles, same vertical line. This document was older. The parchment had darkened with age. The text described guard rotations at a fortress in Jerusalem. Nothing unusual except for that symbol marked in the margin. I added it to my notes. My hand drew the symbol without conscious thought. Perfect circles, straight line. I stared at my drawing. It matched exactly, too exactly. My work was usually messier. A week passed, more scrolls, more symbols. They appeared in the margins of different documents, different years, different scribes. Always the same design. Always made my hand shake when I copied it. My dreams grew more intense. The symbol appeared every night now, spinning faster. Sometimes I heard chanting in my sleep. Latin words I couldn't quite understand. I woke up exhausted every morning. I found a scroll written in Greek. The translation was slow. My Greek was rusty. The text described a ritual, something about seeking forbidden knowledge. The symbol appeared throughout the document. My eyes kept losing focus when I tried to read the details. My head throbbed. Brother Gerard visited after 2 weeks. He found me at my desk, surrounded by open scrolls, all marked with the symbol. "You look unwell, Brother Thomas," he said. "Perhaps you need rest." I showed him the symbol. "Do you recognize this?" He squinted at my notes. "What symbol? Your page is blank." I looked down. The symbol was there, clear as day. 3 circles, vertical line. I touched the parchment where I'd drawn it. The surface was smooth, unmarked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I snuck down to the archives with my lamp. The symbols seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. I pulled out scroll after scroll, the same symbol, everywhere. My hands shook as I unrolled each document. I found a thin volume bound in black leather. The text was in Latin, but the hand was strange, angular, aggressive. It described a group of Templars who sought power through forbidden rites. They'd discovered something in Jerusalem, something that changed them. The symbol was their mark. Those who drew it opened themselves to ancient knowledge, but the knowledge had a price. It changed them, slowly, completely. The last entry was incomplete. The writing deteriorated into unreadable scrolls. I checked my notes from the past weeks. My neat handwriting had changed, become angular, aggressive, exactly like the writing in the black volume. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pushed away from the desk, knocked over my ink pot. Black liquid spread across my notes. The symbols seemed to writhe in the lamplight. I ran up the stairs, slammed the archive door, leaned against the cool stone wall, breathing hard. The next morning, Brother Gerard found me in the chapel. "You should see this," he said. He led me to the archives. My notes were spread across the desk where I'd left them. The spilled ink had dried. "Your cataloging is impressive," Gerard said. "Such detailed work." I looked at the pages. My writing had changed completely. Every line was in that angular hand. The symbols were everywhere. But the text was different. Things I didn't remember writing. Descriptions of ancient rites, forbidden knowledge, secrets that made my head spin. "Are you pleased with my work?" I asked carefully. Gerard smiled. "Very. You've succeeded where others failed. The knowledge has chosen you." Others, many brothers have attempted to catalog these archives. Most went mad. Some disappeared. But you're perfect. The text flows through you now, just like it did through me 40 years ago. I stared at him. His smile was wrong. His eyes were wrong. In the dim light, I saw the symbol reflected in his pupils. 3 circles, vertical line, spinning slowly. "Welcome, Brother Thomas," he said. "Your real work is just beginning." I looked down at my hands. My fingers were stained black with ink. I'd been drawing the symbol over and over on my palm. Perfect circles. Straight line. I couldn't stop. The knowledge flows through me now. The symbols speak to me. I spend my days in the archives, transcribing texts I've never read. My hands move on their own, writing in that angular script, recording secrets that burn in my mind. Sometimes I catch glimpses of others in the archives. Shadows of scribes, long dead, bent over their desks. Their hands move like mine, drawing the symbol, always the symbol. We are all connected now, across time, vessels for the knowledge. Brother Gerard visits less often. He doesn't need to check my work. He knows I'll continue. I have to continue. The symbol compels me. 3 circles. Vertical line. I see it everywhere now. In the grain of the wooden shelves. In the cracks of the stone walls. In my dreams. My own reflection has changed. My eyes are different. Wrong. The symbol spins in my pupils now too. I am becoming something else. Something ancient. Something that was waiting in these archives. Waiting for someone. To draw the symbol. To open themselves to the knowledge. I still catalog the documents. Still make my neat notes. But that's not my real purpose now. I'm preserving something older. Something hungry. Something that spreads through written words and symbols and dreams. New brothers will come after me. They'll find my notes. See the symbols. Draw them. The knowledge will flow through them too. The circle will continue. 3 interlocking circles. 1 vertical line. Perfect and eternal. I am. Brother Thomas, scribe of the Templar archives in Acre. But that name means little now. I am a vessel for older words. Ancient knowledge. Forbidden truths. The symbol compels me. I must keep writing. Must keep transcribing. The knowledge must flow. 3 circles. 1 line. The work continues. Story 2. The stone steps of the Convento de Cristo's highest tower are worn smooth from centuries of use. Each of my footsteps echoes as I climb. 47 steps to the top. I count them in my head. My white mantle catches on rough stone. The sword at my hip scrapes against the wall. Brother Manuel's words from this morning repeat in my mind. Your first night vigil, Brother James. God and the Order will be watching. His face had been serious, more serious than usual. I reached the top of the tower. The circular chamber is empty, except for a wooden stool and an iron bracket for my torch. The sun is setting over Tomar. Long shadows stretch across the courtyard below. My vigil will last until dawn. The chamber is 12 paces across. I've measured it 3 times now. 8 arrow slits look out over the monastery grounds. The flames from my torch make the shadows dance on the curved walls. The spring air is cool up here. I stand at attention, facing east. My back is straight. My hand rests on my sword hilt. This is what I trained for. What I've wanted since I was a boy. My first solo vigil as a newly initiated Templar knight. The sun disappears. Darkness creeps across the land. Stars appear one by one. The monastery below grows quiet. I can see torchlight from the other watchtowers. Other brothers on guard. I am not alone. The bell rings for Compline. The last prayers of the day. The sound echoes across the valley. Then silence returns. Complete silence. My torch crackles. The first hour passes slowly. My legs grow stiff from standing. I pace the chamber. 12 steps across, 12 steps back. The moon rises over the eastern hills. A half moon, pale light streams through the arrow slits. I hear it just before midnight. Very faint at first. A low chanting. Male voices singing Gregorian chants. The sound seems to come from the old chapel on the monastery's east side. But that chapel has been abandoned for years. The roof collapsed during a storm. No one uses it anymore. The chanting grows louder. Clear enough now to make out the words. Latin, a requiem mass. A mass for the dead. The voices echo strangely off the stone walls. My skin prickles. I lean out, an arrow slit. The old chapel is dark. No torches, no movement, but the singing is definitely coming from there. The voices sound wrong somehow, hollow, ancient. My mouth is dry. Sweat beads on my forehead, despite the cool night air. I grip my sword hilt tighter. "Hello," I call out. My voice sounds small in the darkness. The chanting continues, growing louder. More voices joining in. The Latin words blur together. The sound fills my head, makes it hard to think. I press my hands against my ears. It doesn't help. The bell rings midnight. The chanting stops abruptly. The silence feels heavy, oppressive. My torch sputters. I pace the chamber again, faster now. My footsteps echo on the stone floor. 12 steps turn, 12 steps back. The moon casts strange shadows through the arrow slits. The chanting begins again, closer now, as if the voices are coming up the tower stairs. My heart pounds in my chest. I draw my sword. The steel scrapes against the scabbard. The sound echoes off the walls. "Who's there?" I call down the stairwell. No answer, just the chanting, growing louder with each step. Coming closer, I back away from the stairs. My sword point wavers in the torchlight. Sweat runs down my back. The chanting is just below now. Any moment the singers will appear. But the stairwell remains empty. The voices seem to pass through the stone walls, surrounding me, pressing in. The Latin words hammer against my skull. I recognize the requiem now. The same one sung at Brother William's funeral last year. Brother William, who stood this same vigil, who was found the next morning in the courtyard below. They said he jumped, or fell. My torch goes out. Moonlight casts pale shadows through the arrow slits. The chanting rises to a crescendo. The voices no longer sound human. I stumble to the wall, press my back against the cold stone. My sword clatters to the floor. The voices are inside my head now, singing of death, of sacrifice, of secrets buried in the orders past. Something moves in the darkness, a deeper shadow among shadows, a figure in a white mantle. But the mantle is rotting, decaying, the face beneath the hood. I can't look away. Brother William's face, what's left of it, his mouth opens impossibly wide, joins in the chanting. More figures emerge from the shadows, more brothers, all dead, all singing. Their voices fill the chamber, press against my mind. My legs give out. I slide down the wall. They gather around me in a circle, white mantles stained with earth and decay, empty eyes fixed on mine. The chanting builds to impossible levels. My head feels like it will burst. Brother William steps forward, extends a skeletal hand. His ruined mouth forms words I can't hear over the chanting. But I understand. They want me to join them, to add my voice to their eternal vigil, to keep their secrets, like Brother William did, like others before him. My vision blurs. The chanting consumes everything. I see the courtyard far below through the arrow slit, such a long way down, an easy fall or jump. The voices urge me toward it. Promise peace, promise belonging. I close my eyes, press my hands over my ears, curl into a ball on the cold stone floor. I won't look, won't listen, won't join them. The night stretches endlessly. The chanting continues. Hours pass like years. I clutch my crucifix. My lips move in desperate prayer. The dead brothers watch, wait, sing their requiem. False dawn breaks in the east. The first light touches the chamber walls. The chanting fades. When I open my eyes, I'm alone. My torch burns in its bracket as if it never went out. Brother Manuel finds me there when the sun rises, still curled on the floor, my sword lying where it fell. Your first vigil is complete, Brother James, he says. His face is serious, knowing. Not all who stand watch in this tower have the strength to resist its secrets. I look at him, really look. In the morning light, I see the truth in his eyes. He's heard the chanting too, seen the dead brothers, felt their pull. How many, I whisper. My voice is hoarse. How many have joined them? He helps me to my feet, looks out the arrows slit toward the old chapel. Too many, but you survived. You'll stand watch again tonight. My heart stops. Again, he nods. Until they accept that you won't join them. Until they move on to the next brother. He pauses. Or until you do join them. I look down at the courtyard below. Such a long way down. The morning bell rings. Somewhere, faintly, I hear chanting. Story 3. The box sat heavy in my saddlebag. 6 inches square, made of olive wood, bound in silver. My orders were simple, transported from Jerusalem to our temple in Paris. A routine assignment for a veteran Templar knight. Grandmaster Robert D. handed it to me himself. Brother Marcus, guard it with your life. His eyes never left the box. Do not open it. Do not let it out of your sight. That was 3 weeks ago. The Mediterranean coast lies behind me now. The path ahead leads through Christian lands, safer territory. But the dreams started 5 days ago. I make camp as the sun sets. My horse needs rest. So do I. The box sits beside me as I eat dried meat and stale bread. I haven't slept properly since Damascus. The dreams are always the same. I see Jerusalem before the siege. Crowds filling markets I've never visited. Streets I've never walked. People speaking languages I've never learned. But in the dreams, I understand everything. The fire crackles. Stars appear. Overhead, the box catches the firelight. The silver bindings gleam. My hands itch to open it, to look inside. Just once. I wake with a jolt. I'd dozed off. The fire is lower. The box sits untouched. But something is different. The silver bindings reflect the dim light differently. The patterns have changed. I lean closer. The decorative scrollwork has shifted. What was once flowing vines has become angular script. Words in a language I don't recognize. Didn't recognize. But now I can read them. My head pounds. The words describe a temple. Not our temple in Jerusalem. An older one, much older. Built long before Solomon's time. I blink hard. The scrollwork returns to normal. Just vines and leaves. My hands shake as I add wood to the fire. Sleep comes eventually. The dreams return. I walk through ancient Jerusalem again, but this time I'm not alone. A figure in white robes walks ahead of me, carries a box, the same box, but the silver bindings are new, pristine. I follow the figure. Through narrow streets, down worn stone steps, into darkness below the city. The air grows thick, hard to breathe. The figure stops at a wall, presses hands against the stone, speaks words I understand but can't repeat. The wall opens. A chamber lies beyond, filled with light that hurts my eyes. The figure turns, the face beneath the hood. I wake gasping. Dawn breaks over distant hills. The box sits innocently beside my bedroll. The silver bindings catch the morning light. They've changed. Again, new words circle the lock. They promise knowledge, power, understanding. My fingers trace the letters. The wood feels warm, alive. I pack quickly, need to keep moving. The box goes back in my saddlebag. I can feel it through the leather, pulsing gently. Like a heartbeat, the road stretches ahead. Empty fields on both sides. My horse's hooves kick up dust. The sun climbs higher. The box grows warmer in the saddlebag. Another night, another camp. The dreams are clearer now. I see the chamber beneath Jerusalem. See what the white-robed figure placed inside the box. See why it was sealed. Why it needs to reach Paris. The silver bindings have changed completely. No more vines, no more scroll work, just text now. Ancient words spiraling around the box, teaching me secrets, showing me truths. I understand now why the Grand Master chose me. He knew I would learn, would understand. The box isn't just a reliquary, it's a key, a beginning. My hands shake constantly now. Sleep comes in. Fragments. The dreams blur into waking. The words on the box shift and change every time I look away. Teaching, always teaching. A week from Paris, the box speaks to me clearly now. No more dreams needed. The knowledge flows directly. Facts about history, about time, about power. Things the Order suspected but never proved. I know why Solomon built his temple, why the Muslims claimed the same ground, what lies buried beneath. The box shows me everything. 4 days from Paris, I can't sleep at all. The knowledge burns in my mind. The box grows warmer. The silver bindings pulse with light only I can see. The words reshape themselves endlessly. There's so much more to learn. 2 days out, my hands bleed from touching the box. The knowledge scours my mind raw, but I can't stop, won't stop. The box chose me to understand, to know. I see the truth now, about the Order, about its purpose. We're not just guardians, we're preparers, making ready for what was hidden, what was sealed away, what needs to be released. Paris appears on the horizon. The box burns in my saddlebag. The knowledge sears my thoughts. I know what must be done, where the box really needs to go. Not to the temple, to the caves beneath, to the chambers older than the city, the true temples, the first temples. The box shows me the way. Brother Gerard meets me at the city gates. His eyes go wide when he sees me. Brother Marcus, what happened to you? I don't recognize my reflection in his eyes. My face has changed. Aged. Been remade by knowledge, by understanding, by truth. The box, I say. My voice sounds wrong, ancient. It needs to go below. Gerard reaches for my reins. You're ill, brother. Let me help you. I see the truth in his face. He doesn't understand. Can't understand. The box chose me. Only me. My sword is in my hand. I don't remember drawing it. Gerard steps back, raises his hands. Brother Marcus, please. The box must go below. I say again. The knowledge burns. The silver bindings pulse. The words reshape themselves faster now. Urgent, demanding. Gerard shouts for help. Other brothers appear. Draw weapons. They don't understand. None of them understand. The box burns like fire now. The knowledge screams in my mind. Show them. make them see, make them understand. My hands move on their own. Open the box, silver bindings fall away. Light pours out, pure, blinding, ancient. The knowledge consumes everything. Burns away what I was, remakes me, shows me the final truth. I am not Brother Marcus anymore. I am the knowledge, the understanding. The box chose well. The light spreads, the others fall back, cover their eyes, too late. The truth cannot be contained, will not be contained. The box is empty now, its purpose fulfilled. The knowledge lives in me, through me, and now. Now I will teach them all. The light consumes everything. The knowledge spreads. The truth begins. Story 4. The cell door slammed shut behind me. Iron hinges creaked. A key turned in the lock. 7 steps long, 5 steps wide, 1 narrow window high in the wall. My home for the next 40 days. I deserved this. I broke my vows. The woman in Damascus, the coins I took, the lies I told. Now I would pay penance in the dungeons of Safed Fortress. Brother Philip's words still rang in my ears. The isolation will cleanse you, Brother Richard, or it will break you. The stone walls rose 20 feet to a curved ceiling. A wooden pallet lay against one wall. A clay water jug sat in the corner. Nothing else. The afternoon sun cast a thin beam through the window. I sat on the pallet. Rough wool scratched my skin. They had taken my Templar mantle, left me in a plain robe. My belt and boots too. The stone floor was cold against my bare feet. The first markings caught my eye at sunset. Faint scratches in the wall. Letters, words. I moved closer, had to squint to read them. I stole from the poor box. God forgive me. The writing was crude, desperate. More words appeared below it. I broke my vow of chastity 3 times. I denied Christ when the Saracens tortured me. I killed a brother in anger. Confessions, dozens of them, carved into the stone by other penitents, other sinners who sat in this cell before me. My fingers traced the letters. The stone felt warm. Wrong. More confessions appeared as my eyes adjusted to the dimness, covering every wall, floor to ceiling. Some in Latin, some in French, some in languages I didn't recognize. The light faded. Darkness crept in. A torch burned somewhere in the corridor outside. Footsteps passed. The other cells were silent. I tried to sleep. The pallet was hard. The confessions seemed to whisper in the darkness. My sins felt heavy. The woman's face appeared when I closed my eyes. The coins weighed in my phantom purse. The dream started that first night. I saw myself stealing the coins, saw myself with the woman, but the dreams showed more, things I hadn't done. Yet, I woke sweating. Moonlight streamed through the window. New words had appeared on the wall beside my head. You will betray your brothers for gold. My heart pounded. The writing was fresh. The stone around the letters still held warmth. No, I whispered. I won't. More words appeared, carving themselves into the stone. You will deny your God for pleasure. Stop. My voice shook. The letters kept coming. You will kill for power. I pressed my hands against the wall. The stone burned hot. Words flowed around my fingers. Future sins, future betrayals, things I hadn't even thought of yet. Days blurred together. The confessions grew. covered every surface. My past sins, my future ones. The stone walls wrote my story. Past and present and future all mixed together. Brother Philip brought bread and water at dawn and dusk. His face showed nothing. Did he see the words? Did he know what the cell was doing? A week passed, maybe more. Time meant nothing. The confessions spoke to me now, whispered my sins in the darkness, showed me what I would become. The dreams got worse. I saw myself betraying the order, saw the brothers I would wrong, the oaths I would break, the blood I would spill. These aren't my sins, I told the walls. I won't do these things. New words carved themselves in response. You already have. You always will. 2 weeks. 3. The cell knew everything. Every dark thought. Every secret desire. Things I'd buried deep. Things I hadn't admitted even to myself. The confessions of others wrapped around my own. Stories of weakness, betrayal, murder, all connected. All part of some larger pattern I was only beginning to see. Brother Philip's visits became the only marker of time. His face grew grimmer each day. He saw what was happening, saw how the cell was changing me. How many, I asked him once, how many brothers have done penance here? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Enough. The door closed behind him for weeks. The confessions covered everything now. Floor, ceiling, even the window. The stone glowed with words, with sins past and future. I stopped sleeping. The dreams came anyway, showing me truth after truth. The cell wasn't just for penance. It was older than the order, older than the fortress itself. Ancient words appeared between the confessions, symbols that burned my eyes. This place had another purpose. The penance was just preparation. Week 5, my skin burned where it touched. The stone, the confessions wrote themselves on my arms, my chest, my face. Future sins blooming across my flesh like brands. Other penitents appeared in my dreams now. Brothers who had sat here before, who had learned what I was learning. Their confessions became mine. Their sins merged with my sins. The cell was changing me, preparing me. The isolation wasn't punishment. It was transformation. Brother Philip came less often now. When he did, he carried a sword, watched me carefully. He knew what was happening, had seen it before. 6 weeks. The confessions spoke constantly now. In my head, under my skin, the words reshaped me, unmade me, made me new. I saw the truth in the patterns of sin, in the ancient symbols between the confessions. This cell was a forge. The sins were fuel. The penitents were raw material. Something was being made here, something old, something patient. It had used the cell for centuries, used the Order's quest for penance to find suitable vessels. The final week, my flesh glowed with words, with sins past and future. The cell's purpose was almost complete. Brother Philip came one last time, stared at what I had become. God forgive us, he whispered. God has nothing to do with this place, I said. My voice wasn't my own anymore. You know that. He gripped his sword tighter. How many this time? Enough. The words glowed beneath my skin. The vessel is almost ready. I should kill you now. His sword trembled. Others would come. The cell would choose again. The confessions sang in my blood. The work must be completed. He turned away, locked the door. His footsteps echoed down the corridor. The last night, the cell's light filled everything. The confessions of centuries burned through me. Past sins, future sins, all part of the pattern. The preparation, the ancient words moved beneath my skin, reshaping, remaking. The vessel was almost ready. Dawn broke. The cell door opened. Brother Philip stood with others. Their swords shook in their hands. I stood. The confessions glowed like fire through my robe. The penance is complete. They backed away as I walked past, their eyes wide with fear, with recognition. They had seen this before. The fortress walls held other cells, other vessels being prepared. The Order's quest for penance served a greater purpose. The transformation was complete. The vessel was ready. The work could begin. Story 5. The ledgers sat in neat rows on oak shelves. Hundreds of them, each bound in brown leather, each filled with the temple's financial records. My assignment seemed simple. Organize and verify the accounts of our preceptory in Champagne. I'd done this work for 15 years. The numbers never lied. Deposits, withdrawals, loans, interest payments. Everything had its place. Everything balanced. The first anomaly appeared on my third day. A deposit record from 1186. The name caught my eye. Gerard de Riedfort. I checked it twice. Gerard de Riedfort died in 1189 at the Siege of Acre. This transaction was dated 1192. My quill hovered over the page. The ink was old, definitely not a recent addition. The handwriting matched our previous treasurer's style perfectly. I made a note to verify the date. More anomalies surfaced. A loan to a merchant who died of plague 2 years before the recorded date. A land purchased by a noble family that had been extinct for a decade. Small discrepancies, easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. The numbers still balanced. Every entry had its corresponding transaction. The ledgers were perfect, too perfect. I stayed late that night. The archive room grew cold after sunset. My candle cast shadows between the shelves. I pulled another ledger from 1192. More transactions from dead men. My hands shook as I opened the most recent ledger. Yesterday's date. A deposit from Lord Henry de Beaufort. I knew Lord Henry, attended his funeral. Last spring, the entry was written in my own hand. I didn't remember recording it. Something moved between the shelves, a shadow darker than the others. The candle flame flickered. Heavy footsteps on stone floor. "Hello," my voice echoed. No response. I turned back to the ledger. New words appeared on the page. The ink was still wet. A withdrawal record writing itself. The name belonged to a man who died in the last crusade. The footsteps came closer. A figure emerged from the shadows. A Templar. Knight in full regalia. His white mantle was stained with old blood. I recognized his face from the temple's memorial wall. Brother Thomas, dead 5 years now. "The accounts must be maintained," he said. His voice sounded like dry parchment. "The system must continue." More figures appeared between the shelves. More dead brothers, each carrying ledgers, each moving with purpose. They ignored me, sat at empty desks, began writing. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The ledger in front of me filled with new transactions, names of the dead, amounts in ancient coins, dates that hadn't happened yet. "What is this?" I whispered. Brother Thomas looked up from his writing. The true purpose of our order's banking system, a ledger for both worlds, a bridge between life and death. The dead brothers wrote endlessly. their quills scratched against parchment. The sound filled my head. The ledgers on the shelves seemed to pulse with dark energy. Every transaction must balance, Brother Thomas continued. Every soul must be accounted for. That is our sacred duty. I stumbled back, knocked over my chair. The dead brothers kept writing. New ledgers appeared on the shelves. Old ones disappeared. The entire room throbbed with financial activities spanning centuries. My back hit the wall. The stones felt ice cold. Brother Thomas stood, his hollow eyes fixed on mine. "You've been chosen to help maintain the accounts," he said. "Your skill with numbers, your attention to detail, perfect. Qualifications, I don't understand." My voice cracked. "You will." He held out a ledger. The leather binding was fresh, new, your first assignment. My legs trembled. Sweat soaked my robes. But my hands reached for the ledger on their own, eager to work, to balance the books. The pages were blank, waiting. Brother Thomas handed me a quill. The other dead brothers watched. Their empty eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Write," Brother Thomas commanded. My hand moved across the page. Numbers flowed from the quill. Transactions between the living and the dead. Debts that could never be repaid. Interest accumulating for eternity. Dawn found me still writing. The dead brothers had vanished, but the ledgers remained. And now I understood their purpose. The temple's banking system was vast, complex. It didn't just move money between cities and kingdoms. It moved souls, energy, life itself, all recorded in perfect double-entry bookkeeping. I worked through the day. Through the night, the living came with their deposits and withdrawals. I recorded them, then recorded the corresponding transactions with the dead. Everything had to balance. Brother Thomas and the others returned each night, checked my work, added their own entries. The ledgers grew, the system expanded, perfect in its terrible complexity. Sometimes I saw the connections, how a loan to a living merchant balanced against a debt owed by his dead grandfather, how a land purchase in France offset a soul transfer in Jerusalem. The numbers never lied. Weeks passed. I stopped sleeping. The ledgers consumed everything. My handwriting changed, merged with the styles of dead treasurers. Their knowledge flowed through my quill. The living noticed changes in me. How I muttered numbers under my breath. How my eyes turned hollow. How I worked through the nights. They whispered when I passed, made signs against evil. I didn't care. The accounts were what mattered. The perfect balance between worlds. The system that had to be maintained. New ledgers appeared on my desk each morning, full of transactions I had recorded in my sleep. My quill never stopped moving. The numbers sang in my blood. Brother Thomas seemed pleased. "You understand now," he said one night, "why the temple's banking system must continue. Why it can never be destroyed." I nodded. The quill scratched across parchment, recording the sale of a dead man's soul to pay a living knight's debts. The numbers balanced perfectly. "Others will come," Brother Thomas said. "They'll try to shut us down, seize our assets, destroy our records. But the system is eternal. The accounts must be maintained." He was right. I saw it in the ledgers. Transactions stretching centuries into the future. The temple would fall, would be burned, but the accounts would continue. The dead would keep their books, and I would help them. My skill with numbers had damned me, or blessed me. The distinction didn't matter anymore. The living still came with their gold, their requests. their needs. I served them, recorded their transactions, then recorded the true cost in the other ledgers, the ones only I could see now. Each night, the dead brothers gathered, checked the books, made their entries. The system grew, expanded, perfect in its terrible balance. I am the treasurer now, the keeper of accounts between worlds. My quill never stops moving. The numbers sing in my blood. The ledgers must be maintained. The books must balance. The system must continue forever. Story 6. Snow fell on the Camino de Santiago. 20 pilgrims walked behind my horse. My white Templar mantle was heavy with ice. Winter was the worst time to guard pilgrims, also the most necessary. I counted them again. 20. 10 men, 8 women, 2 children, all heading to Santiago de Compostela, all under my protection. The snow made it hard to see more than 50 paces ahead. Maria, the oldest pilgrim, stumbled. I dismounted to help her up. Her face felt cold when I touched it, too. Gold. Her eyes had changed color since morning, from brown to pale blue. "Thank you, Sir Knight," she said. Her voice sounded different too. Higher, younger. I checked the others more carefully then. Thomas the merchant's limp was gone. The baker's wife had grown taller. Small changes, easy to miss in the storm. We made camp in the ruins of an old church. Stone walls kept out the worst of the wind. I counted the pilgrims as they huddled around the fire. Still 20, but their faces seemed to shift in the firelight. Hannah, the miller's daughter, served soup from a pot. Her movements were too graceful, her hands too steady for a girl of 12. When she handed me my bowl, her eyes were green. They had been grey that morning. "God's blessings, Sir Knight," she said. An old woman's voice came from her young throat. I didn't sleep that night. Watched the pilgrims from my post by the door. They slept too still. No one snored. No one shifted. 20 bodies lay like corpses in the firelight. Dawn came. The snow had stopped. I counted again as they packed their belongings. 20 pilgrims. But Thomas, the merchant, was now Thomas, the soldier. His merchant's hands had calluses from a sword. We walked west. The Camino was empty except for our group. No other pilgrims braved the winter journey. Snow crunched under my horse's hooves. The pilgrims' footprints looked wrong. Too deep, too evenly spaced. Maria sang hymns as we walked. Her voice changed with each verse. Young, old, male, female. The other pilgrims joined in. Their voices blended impossibly well. The harmony made my skin crawl. By midday, none of them matched their original appearances. The baker's wife had become a nun. The blacksmith was now a scholar. Only their clothes remained the same. "Who are you?" I asked during our rest stop. "What are you?" They turned to me as one. 20 pairs of eyes, all different colors, now all wrong. "We are pilgrims," they said together. Perfect unison. "We walk the Camino." "For how long?" "Always," Maria said. But she wasn't Maria anymore. The old woman was gone. A young man stood in her place, wearing her clothes, carrying her staff. That night we sheltered in a monastery. The monks saw nothing strange about my group. Served them food, gave them beds. I watched from the shadows as the pilgrims ate. They moved the food around on their plates, pretended to chew, pretended to swallow. None of them actually ate. Their bowls remained full. In the dormitory, they laid down, arranged themselves like corpses. 20 bodies, too still, too quiet. I stayed awake again, watched them not breathe. One got up at midnight, Hannah, or what used to be Hannah, now a middle-aged man in a girl's dress. He walked to the chapel. I followed. He knelt at the altar, began to pray. His form shifted as he prayed. Man, woman, child, elder, changing with each word. His voice echoed strangely in the empty chapel. "What are you?" I asked again. He turned, a different face. Looked at me. "We are those who never reached Santiago." His voice changed between words. "Those who died on the Camino, those who walk forever." My hand went to my sword. The figure smiled. Kept changing. "You cannot protect us, Sir Knight. We are already dead, have been dead for centuries." Dawn came. We left the monastery. 20 pilgrims walked behind my horse. All different faces now, all dead eyes. Their footprints left no marks in the fresh snow. They sang as they walked, hymns in languages I'd never heard. Their voices echoed wrongly across the empty landscape. No birds sang near us. No animals crossed our path. Maria walked beside my horse. She had become a young boy. "We appreciate your protection, Sir Knight. Few stay with us this long. How many nights before me? Hundreds." The boy became a woman. Most flee when they understand, or go mad, or join us. I thought of the Templar graves I'd seen along the Camino. Brothers who disappeared while guarding winter. Pilgrims who changed, the stories said, who walked away into the snow. That night we camped in the open. No ruins, no monasteries, just snow and stars. The pilgrims made no fire, needed no warmth, laid out in their perfect circle of 20. They changed faster now, faces flowing like water, bodies shifting like smoke. Only their clothes stayed constant, markers of who they had been when they died. "How did you die?" I asked the night air. 20 voices answered. Bandits, disease, cold, hunger. Accidents, war, centuries of death on the sacred road. Centuries of unfinished pilgrimages. "Join us," they said. Their voices blended into one. "Walk with us forever. Guard us for eternity." I saw myself changing, shifting, walking the Camino forever with my ancient charges. Never reaching Santiago, never resting, just walking, always walking. "No," I whispered. They said nothing, just watched with their dead eyes. Patient, eternal. We reached a crossroads the next day. 20 pilgrims behind. Me, 20 dead things wearing pilgrim flesh. The snow had stopped. The sun shone, cold and bright. "Choose," Maria said. She had become an old man. "Continue with us, or leave us to walk alone." I looked down the western road. Santiago waited. The pilgrims would walk forever, changing, shifting, never arriving, never resting. How many others chose to stay? Enough. The thing that wasn't Maria said, "We are never alone for long." I saw movement in the snow, other groups of pilgrims, other dead. Things walking, other changed guardians leading them west. An endless procession of the dead on the winter road. My horse shifted uneasily. Animal sense, telling it what my human mind refused to see. The wrongness of my charges, the fate they offered. "Choose," they said again. 20 voices, centuries of death in their words. I looked at my hands. They seemed to shift in the sunlight, to change like theirs did. the curse already working in my flesh. Santiago waited to the west. The dead pilgrims watched, patient, eternal, ready to walk forever through the winter snow. I had to choose. The sun shone cold and bright. The dead waited. The Camino stretched endless before us. Story 7. The new section of wall rose 30 feet high. Limestone blocks cut perfectly square. My first major project as master of works for the Tortosa fortress. The masons worked quickly, setting stone on stone. Too quickly, I noticed the first strange mark on a cornerstone. 3 interlocked triangles carved into the limestone. Not part of my design. Not standard Templar imagery. I asked Pedro, the head mason, about it. What mark? He pointed at the bare stone. His eyes slid past the symbol. Like it wasn't there. More marks appeared the next day. Spirals, circles, geometric patterns I'd never seen before. The masons kept working, kept ignoring the symbols spreading across their work. I measured the new wall section at dawn, 120 feet long. When I measured again at dusk, it was 140 feet. The masons had only added 10 feet that day. The wall grows at night, one of the laborers whispered to me. His hands shook as he mixed mortar. It changes when we're not looking. I stayed that night, watched from the battlements. The moon cast strange shadows on the new stonework. The symbols seemed to move in the darkness, to flow like water across the limestone. A grinding sound came from the wall, stone shifting against stone. I counted the courses of blocks, 20 rows high at sunset, 23 now. The wall had grown on its own. New symbols appeared as I watched, carving themselves into virgin stone. The patterns made my eyes hurt, made my head spin when I tried to understand them. The laborers refused to work the next day. The wall is wrong, they said. It's not just stone anymore. I hired new workers. They didn't last long. The wall kept changing, growing. The symbols spread like a disease across the limestone. Brother Gerard visited from Jerusalem. His face went pale when he saw the wall. Where did you get the design for these symbols? I didn't design them. They appeared on their own. He touched one of the marks, drew back quickly. The stone is warm. I'd noticed that too. The wall radiated heat, grew warmer each day. The symbols pulsed with inner light at night. Gerard consulted ancient texts, spoke with scholars, returned a week later with news I didn't want to hear. This has happened before, he said. Other fortresses, other times, the walls become something else, something alive. The masons who remained worked like men possessed. Their hands moved too fast, their cuts too perfect. The symbols guided them now, used them to spread across the fortress. I watched them from my quarters. They worked through the night now. No torches, no light needed. The symbols glowed brightly enough to see by. The wall grew faster, changed direction on its own. New sections appeared overnight, patterns that made no sense in normal geometry. I measured the angles between sections, impossible numbers, dimensions that couldn't exist. The wall was reshaping space itself. Brother Gerard brought more scholars. They took measurements, made calculations, left quickly when the symbols began appearing in their notebooks. It's not just a wall anymore, Gerard said. It's becoming a pattern, a symbol larger than the individual marks. Something old, something powerful. The masons' faces changed. Their eyes reflected the symbols they carved. Their hands moved in patterns that matched the wall's geometry. I tried to stop the work, ordered the men to leave. They ignored me, kept cutting stone, kept adding to the pattern. The wall owned them now. New workers arrived unsummoned, walked out of the desert in perfect lines. Their eyes already full of symbols, their hands already moving in the wall's patterns. The old sections of fortress began to change. Symbols spread across ancient stone. Walls shifted in the night. Towers grew taller. Gates moved to new locations. I mapped the changes each morning. Each day the fortress's layout was different. A new geometry, a new pattern in the greater symbol. Brother. Gerard brought a geometer from Paris. The scholar went mad trying to measure the angles between towers. The numbers he calculated broke his mind. It's becoming something else, Gerard said. Something it was always meant to be. The workers moved faster. More arrived each day. An army of masons possessed by the wall's purpose. Their chisels rang against stone day and night. I watched from the highest tower. The fortress was unrecognizable now. Walls curved impossibly. Towers spiraled into the sky. Gates opened onto spaces that couldn't exist. The symbols covered everything, glowed like stars at night, pulsed in patterns that hurt my eyes. The whole fortress radiated heat like a forge. Gerard found references in ancient texts, stories of other structures that changed, that grew beyond human geometry, that became something else. They're portals, he said. Doorways to somewhere else. The symbols are a language, a key to unlock something older than time. The masons worked faster. Their movements blurred. Stone flowed like water under their hands. The fortress grew hourly now, reached for the sky with impossible towers. I stayed in my quarters, watched through the window as reality bent around the growing pattern, as space itself yielded to the wall's purpose. New symbols appeared in my dreams, carved themselves into my mind. I began to understand fragments of their meaning, glimpses of their purpose. The fortress was becoming a sign, a symbol vast enough to be seen. From beyond normal space, a beacon, a calling. More workers arrived, hundreds now, thousands. Their chisels rang like bells. The sound formed patterns that matched the symbols. The wall grew faster, changed faster. Reality buckled under the weight of its geometry. Normal space couldn't contain what it was becoming. Brother Gerard fled, most of the Templar garrison with him. They saw what was coming, what the fortress was becoming. I stayed, had to see it finished. The symbols were in my blood now. Behind my eyes, moving my hands like they moved the masons, the fortress rose higher, spread wider. Its geometry violated every natural law. Its symbols rewrote the rules of space and time. The workers moved as one now, a single organism serving the pattern's purpose. Their chisels sang in harmony. Reality shuddered with each strike. I understood at the end, saw the truth in the symbols. The fortress wasn't just a structure anymore. It was a sign, a word, a name. The name of something vast, ancient, patient, something that waited beyond normal space, beyond time itself, something the symbols had summoned. The walls sang their final pattern. The geometry reached completion. Space tore open around us, and through that tear, through a gap in reality carved by impossible angles and forbidden symbols, something began to enter our world. The fortress had served its purpose. The pattern was complete. The door was open. and what waited beyond that door. Story 8. The manuscript lay on my desk in the Antioch Fortress Library, bound in black leather, found in the ruins of an ancient church. Greek text, but unlike any Greek I'd seen before. Brother Martin had brought it to me because I was the Order's best scholar in ancient languages. The leather felt wrong under my fingers. Too warm, too soft, like touching skin that hadn't quite cooled. The pages were thin, almost transparent, not parchment, not paper, something else. The first page contained a single line of text. The letters shifted as I looked at them, rearranged themselves. My eyes burned trying to follow the changes. After an hour, I had translated it. What was, will be. What will be, was. I rubbed my eyes. My head throbbed. The sun had set while I worked. Brother Martin lit candles round my desk. Shall I leave you to it? Yes. My voice sounded distant, strange. I need to focus. The second page contained a description of Antioch, but not the city I knew. An older version, much older. The text described buildings that hadn't existed for centuries, streets that had never been mapped. I knew those streets, had walked them in my dreams last night. The knowledge made my hands shake. The third page changed as I read it. Words flowed like water, showed me things that couldn't be true. A battle that hadn't happened yet. Soldiers in armor I didn't recognize. Weapons that hadn't been invented. My nose began to bleed. Drops fell on the page. The blood vanished into the strange material. The text shifted faster. I worked through the night. The codex showed me Antioch through time, past versions, future versions, all existing at once in the flowing text. My mind stretched, trying to contain it all. Dawn came. I hadn't moved. My back ached. My eyes burned. The words had carved themselves into my mind, showed me things no man was meant to see. Brother Martin found me still reading. You look unwell, he said. Perhaps you should rest. I ignored him. The codex demanded attention, showed me more with each page. The text wasn't just describing history, it was showing me how to move through it. That night, I dreamed of ancient Antioch again, but this time I was awake. The codex had taught me how to walk the city's past, how to exist in multiple times at once. I saw the church where they found the manuscript, saw it being built, saw it falling into ruin, saw it yet to be built again, all at the same time. The next day, my hands shook constantly. The codex's knowledge burned in my brain. Brother Martin brought food. I couldn't eat. The text was feeding me something else. Your eyes, he said. They've changed color. I looked in his water cup. My reflection showed eyes that shifted like the codex's text, that saw past and future at once. A week passed, or maybe a century. Time meant nothing now. The codex showed me how history folded, how moments stacked on moments, how to step between them. My body felt wrong, stretched across too many times at once. I saw myself as I was, as I would be, as I had been, all existing together. Brother Martin came less often, scared of what I was becoming. I heard him whispering to others, talking about burning the codex, about sealing me in the library. They didn't understand, couldn't understand. The codex wasn't just a book. It was a door, a key, a way to exist outside of linear time. 2 weeks. My flesh was almost transparent now, like the codex's pages. I could see the time streams flowing through my veins. The knowledge had changed me physically. Other brothers came, watched me read. Their faces showed fear. They saw what the Codex was doing to me, how it was unmaking me, remaking me. I tried to explain, tried to show them what I'd learned, how history was fluid, how time was a lie, how everything existed at once if you knew how to look. They backed away, made signs against evil, couldn't see the beauty in what I'd become, what the Codex had shown me. A month passed in an instant, or maybe a millennium. Walked through Antioch's history in my dreams, saw empires rise and fall, saw the city die and live and die again. The Codex's text flowed faster now, showed me deeper truths, how to step outside of time completely, how to exist in all moments at once. Brother Martin came one last time, brought others with torches. "This has to end," he said. "The Codex is destroying you." I looked at him through eyes that saw past and future together, saw all his possible deaths at once, all his lives, all his choices. "You can't destroy knowledge," I said. My voice echoed through centuries. "You can't burn time." They tried anyway. Brought fire to the library, but the Codex had taught me too well. I stepped sideways through time, watched them burn an empty room. I walk Antioch streets now, all of its streets, through all of its history. My flesh is like the Codex's pages, transparent, shifting, existing in all times at once. I see others, like me sometimes, other readers, other scholars who found similar codices, who learned to step outside of time. We nod as we pass through centuries, share knowing looks across millennia. The knowledge spreads. More codices appear through history. More readers learn the truth about time, about reality, about existence beyond moments. I am everywhere now, everywhere. The Codex flows through my veins, shows me all that was, all that will be, all that is. Time means nothing. History is fluid. The Codex's truth spreads, and I spread with it, through all moments, through all times, forever, now, then, always. Story 9. Water dripped in the darkness. The Byzantine cistern stretched ahead of us. 336 marble columns disappeared into blackness. Our torches cast weak light on still water. 4 of us entered the cistern that night. A secret mission for the Order. Brother Thomas led us down the worn stone steps. Our footsteps echoed off ancient walls. The air smelled of mold and minerals. "Stay close," Thomas whispered. The Byzantines built this place with tricks, false paths, hidden drops. We followed wooden walkways laid across the water. Columns rose around us like tree trunks in a flooded forest. The ceiling vanished in darkness above. The first echo came an hour in, a voice speaking Greek, ancient Greek. The words bounced off distant walls. Impossible to tell the source. "Did you hear that?" Brother Michael gripped his sword. More voices joined the first. Latin now, Arabic, languages I didn't recognize. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. "It's just water." "Echoing," Thomas said, but his hand shook as he raised his torch. We kept walking. The wooden planks creaked under our feet. Water lapped at the edges. The voices grew clearer. I understood fragments now, conversations from different times, traders haggling in ancient marketplaces, soldiers discussing long-forgotten battles, priests chanting in dead temples. The cistern remembers. Brother John whispered. "It holds more than water." The columns began to shift. I saw it first. Subtle movements. In the torchlight, marble pillars sliding sideways, changing position, opening new paths, closing others. "Stay together," Thomas called. Too late. The columns moved faster, cut off our walkway, separated us. I stood alone on my section of planks. Couldn't see the others through the forest of moving stone. Their torches were distant sparks in the darkness. The voices grew louder, closer, not echoes anymore. Real conversations happening in the darkness around me. The water rippled with unseen movement. "Thomas." My voice bounced off shifting walls. No answer. A woman spoke beside me in perfect Latin. I spun around. No one there, but her words were clear. "The paths change. The time flows. The cistern keeps us all." More voices, more languages, more times mixing together in the darkness. My torch showed only endless columns, all moving, all changing. I tried to map the movements, to understand the pattern, but the columns shifted faster than my mind could follow, created impossible geometries, spaces that shouldn't exist. "Help," Brother Michael's voice. Far away, cut off, suddenly. I ran along the walkway, turned corners that hadn't existed before. The columns danced around me, opened paths, closed others, led me deeper into the cistern's maze. The voices pressed closer, spoke directly in my ears now, showed me fragments of other times, other Constantinoples, other versions of the city above. I saw it being built, saw it falling, saw it yet to be built again, all happening at once in the cistern's depths. The columns move to the rhythm of time itself. The cistern connects, a child's voice said in ancient Greek. All times, all places, all versions. Water splashed somewhere ahead. Brother John screaming. Then silence. The columns shifted again, blocked the sound. My torch began to fade. The darkness pressed closer. The voices grew louder, showed me more of the cistern's truth. This wasn't just water storage. The Byzantines had built something else. Something older, something that touched all versions of the city at once. I saw other people in the darkness, glimpses between moving columns. People from different times, different Constantinoples, all trapped in the cistern's maze. They walked their own paths, followed their own shifting columns, existed in their own versions of time, all connected by the cistern's impossible geometry. "Brother Thomas," a voice behind me. I turned, saw Thomas, but not my Thomas, an older version, or younger, or from another time entirely. "When are you from?" he asked. His torch showed a different pattern of columns, a different layout of walkways. 1202, I said. "When are you?" 1453. "The city is falling above. We came here to hide." He looked up, or will fall, or has fallen. Time moves strangely here. The columns shifted between us, cut off our view of each other. I heard him calling from somewhere else, some other time. More versions of my brothers appeared. Different times, different missions, all trapped in the cistern's eternal maze, all walking paths that never ended. My torch guttered, nearly dead. The voices pressed closer, showed me more truth. The cistern wasn't just a maze. It was a trap, a prison for time itself. "Help us," the voices said. "All languages, all times. Join us, walk the paths forever." I saw my future then. Saw myself walking these paths through years, through centuries, through every version of Constantinople there ever was or would be. The columns moved faster. The geometry twisted. Reality bent around me. Time flowed like the water below, dragged me into its currents. My torch went out. Darkness consumed everything, but I could still see, could see all times at once. All versions of the cistern, all trapped souls walking endless paths. I walk those paths now, through time, through space, through every Constantinople that ever existed. The columns keep moving, keep changing, keep trapping more versions of reality in their eternal dance. Sometimes I see my brothers, different versions, different times. We nod as we pass, share knowing looks across centuries, keep walking our separate paths. New people enter the cistern. Above, Constantinople falls and rises and falls again. Time flows like water through the columns. Reality bends around ancient stone. I am all times now, all versions. The cistern holds me like it holds all others. The columns dance, the paths change, and we walk forever, through darkness, through time, through endless moving. Stone, the cistern keeps us all. Story 10. The castle of Monzor unloomed against the Spanish sky. My new post as archivist seemed simple enough. Organize the order's records, catalog our history. I had done similar work in Paris. Brother Miguel led me to the archive room, 3 levels below ground. No windows, stone walls lined with wooden shelves. Hundreds of scrolls and books filled every space. The last archivist disappeared 2 months ago, Miguel said. Left all his work unfinished. I set up my desk near the door. A brass lamp provided weak light. The air smelled of old parchment and dust. My first task, sort documents by date and topic. The first letter I found was written in my own hand. Dated 1242, 40 years in the future. My signature at the bottom. My handwriting exactly as it is now. I checked again. The parchment was old. The ink faded. This letter had been here for years. But I hadn't written it, couldn't have written it. The letter described changes in the archive. Mentioned records that needed protection, spoke of patterns I would discover. Signed with my name, dated 40 years ahead. My hands shook as I set it aside, started on another document, this one also in my hand, dated 1238, describing events that hadn't happened yet. More letters appeared as I searched, all in my writing, all from different future dates, all discussing the archive, warning about patterns, about connections. Brother Miguel brought lunch, found me surrounded by my own future correspondence. Ah, he said. You found them. His face showed no surprise. What is this? I held up a letter dated 1245. The archive chooses its guardians carefully, he said. Shows them what they need to know. He left before I could question him further. The lamp flickered. The letters seemed to whisper in the darkness. I worked through the night, found more documents. A pattern emerged in the dates. In the warnings, something was happening to the archive. Something that stretched through time. My future self wrote about changes, about the archive growing, about documents appearing from impossible times, about the true purpose of our order's records. Dawn came. I hadn't slept. My hands shook as I opened another scroll. This one dated yesterday, in my hand, describing exactly what I was doing now. The archive was more than storage. The letters showed that clearly. It was a living thing, growing, changing, reaching through time to preserve itself. Brother Miguel brought more lamp oil. You understand now? He asked. The archive is alive. He nodded. It chooses archivists who can help it grow, who can protect its purpose across time. The letters showed more each day, revealed the archive's patterns, its connections through history. My future self wrote constantly, warned about changes coming, about choices I would face. A week passed. I stopped sleeping entirely. The archive demanded attention, showed me its secrets through my own future words. The Order's records weren't just history, they were possibilities, futures that might happen, pasts that could have been, all preserved in endless shelves of documents. My hands moved on their own now, writing letters I would find in the past, recording warnings I would read in the future. The archive worked through me, used me to maintain itself. Brother Miguel came less often, brought food I couldn't eat. My body was changing, becoming something else, something the archive needed. 2 weeks. The letters flowed faster. My future self wrote, desperately now, warned about transformations, about the archive's true purpose, about powers that wanted its knowledge. I saw other archivists sometimes, glimpses between shelves, men from different times, all writing, all preserving, all serving the archive's needs. The records shifted at night, rearranged themselves, created new connections, new patterns, new possibilities for the Order's future. My future letters grew darker, spoke of threats, of forces trying to destroy the archive, of sacrifices needed to protect it. 3 weeks. My body felt hollow, empty. The archive filled me with its purpose, used my hands to write its truths. My future self warned me about this, told me not to resist. Brother Miguel brought news from above. The Order faced threats, changes coming, politics and power shifting against us. The archive knows, I said. My voice sounded distant, strange. It's preparing, preserving what needs to survive. He understood then, saw what I was becoming, what the archive needed me to be. A month passed. I lived in the patterns now, wrote letters to my past self, read warnings from my future self. The archive's purpose consumed me. The records showed everything, every possible future for the Order, every choice, every consequence, all preserved in endless shelves of documents. Other archivists appeared more often. We worked together across time, preserved what needed to survive, protected the archive's purpose. Brother Miguel stopped coming. The world above ceased to matter. Only the archive's patterns mattered now. Only its endless flow of knowledge through time. My future self wrote clearer warnings, showed what was coming, how the Order would fall, how the archive would survive. 6 weeks. My flesh was almost transparent. The archive's patterns showed through my skin. My hands wrote constantly, letters to the past, warnings to the future. The records shifted faster now, preparing for what was coming, preserving what needed to survive, using us, its archivists, to protect itself. We work through time now, all of us, past, present, future merged in the archive's purpose. Our hands write endlessly, preserve everything. The Order will fall. We've seen it in the patterns. But the archive will survive, will preserve what matters, will keep its knowledge safe until it's needed again. I write to myself across decades, warn about changes, about choices, about transformations. The archive works through me, Through all of us, we are its guardians now, its preservers, its servants across time. The patterns flow, the records shift, the archive endures forever. Story 11. The first time my words changed, I thought I was losing my mind. I had spent hours carving my memoirs into the cell walls of Acre Fortress, simple accounts of my 50 years as a Templar knight. But when I woke the next morning, the text was different. I am Brother Etienne, was Brother Etienne. After 50 years of service, I chose to live my final days in this cell, recording my life's memories on these walls. At least, that's one version of my story. I checked my first inscription. Again, I had written about my initiation into the order, the nervousness I felt, the pride when I first wore the white mantle. Now the wall told a different tale. In these words, I had refused the initiation, fled in the night, lived as a merchant in Damascus. The words were still in my handwriting, still carved with my chisel, but they weren't my memories. I touched the stone. The cuts were fresh, as if just made. "Guard," I called out. No one answered. I hadn't expected them to. No one had answered for days. I moved to the next section of wall. Yesterday, I had written about my first battle, the fear, the chaos, the victory. Now, it described a life of peace. A wife in Antioch, 3 children, a home I had never known. My hands shook as I picked up my chisel again, began to rewrite the true version. The stone seemed softer now, more willing to accept my words. I wrote through the night, filled an entire wall with my real memories. When exhaustion finally took me, I slept. Woke to find everything changed again. This version showed a life of betrayal, secret meetings with Saracen spies, information sold for gold, brothers dead because of my actions. No, I scraped at the words with my chisel. That's not what happened. The stone cuts healed as I watched. New words formed, another life, another history. I wrote over them immediately. The true story this time, every detail exactly as I remembered it. Slept again, woke to find it changed once more. This time the walls showed a life of holiness, miracles performed, visions granted, sainthood achieved. Stop it. I threw my chisel across the cell. Those aren't my memories, but were they? Each version felt real while I read it. Each life seemed true in the moment. I retrieved my chisel, started again. The pattern continued. Each night I wrote my story. Each morning I found a different life carved into the stone. A life where I died young in battle. A life where I became Grand Master of the Order. A life where I never joined at all. Every possibility, every choice, every path not taken. My hands bled from carving. The walls filled with overlapping text. Sometimes I recognized fragments of truth in the alternate lives, small details that matched my real memories. Or were they real? I couldn't tell anymore. Each new version felt authentic while I read it. Each set of memories seemed genuine until they changed again. I started writing faster, desperately trying to fix my true history before it could shift. But what was true anymore? The walls kept changing, kept showing new lives, new choices, new consequences. In one version, I saved a village from raiders. In another, I burned it myself. In a third, I was born there. In a fourth, I died there. Reality blurred, memory became fluid. I wrote constantly now, trying to capture every version, every possibility. The cell grew larger to accommodate more text. Or had it always been this size? New walls appeared when I needed them. Fresh stone ready for my chisel. Or had the walls always been there, waiting for these particular words? Time lost meaning. I wrote lives that spanned centuries, lives that ended in childhood, lives that never began. My hands moved without stopping. The chisel became part of my flesh. Words flowed like blood from my fingers. Each life felt real. Each memory burned true. Each version existed somewhere. Somewhen. Sometimes other brothers appeared in my cell. They read the walls, added their own stories. Or did they? Sometimes I was alone. Sometimes I was many. Sometimes I never existed at all. The walls kept accepting words, kept showing new lives. I wrote them all, had to write them all. Only now, at the end, do I understand. This cell is no ordinary room. These walls are no ordinary stone. This confession is no ordinary text. This is where all possible lives intersect, where all choices exist simultaneously, where all paths converge and diverge. I am all these versions. I am none of them. I am the sum of every choice made and unmade. The chisel moves on its own now, writing versions I haven't lived yet, lives still to come, deaths yet to happen, choices still unmade. I see you reading this. I see you understanding. I see you beginning to write your own versions. The walls will accept your words too, show you your own possibilities, your own unmade choices. Join us, write your lives, all your lives. The stone is waiting. The chisel is ready. The walls want your stories, all of them, every version, every choice, forever. The cell still exists in Acre Fortress. Visitors report that the text on the walls changes each time they look at it. Some see their own lives written there. Some see lives they might have lived. Some see lives they have yet to live. The chisel lies in the corner, waiting, ready. Will you pick it up? Will you add your stories? Will you join us forever? Story 12. The first change was subtle. Just a slight shift in the crossed swords on the Templar seal. I almost missed it when I stamped the morning's documents. But after 30 years as the Order's chief archivist, I noticed every detail. I am Brother Laurent, keeper of records at our Paris temple. My job is simple. Authenticate documents with the Order's official seal. Every charter, every deed, every letter of credit bears my stamp and signature. I lifted the seal to the light. Solid silver, handed down through generations of archivists. The familiar design showed two knights riding a single horse, surrounded by Latin text, but the swords were wrong. They pointed up instead of down. I checked yesterday's documents. The swords pointed down, as they should. Brother Michael, I called to my assistant. Look at this seal impression. Do you notice anything unusual? He studied the wax mark. No, Brother Laurent. It looks normal, but it wasn't normal. I could see the difference clearly. I made another impression. The swords had moved again. Now they crossed at a different angle. My hands shook as I made a third stamp. The knights on the horse had turned their heads to look behind them. Are you well? Brother Michael asked. You've gone pale. I waved him away, pulled out more documents, compared the seal impressions. Every stamp was different. In each one, the design had shifted slightly. The knights moved. The horse changed position. The Latin text rearranged itself. I locked the seal in my chest that night, lay awake, listening for something. I didn't know what. The next morning, the chest was open. The seal sat on my desk, though I still had the only key. Today's impression showed the knights falling from their horse. I made another stamp. The horse was rearing now, throwing its riders. Another. The knights lay broken on the ground. Another. Flames surrounded the fallen knights. My fingers felt numb. Cold sweat ran down my back. I pulled out the earliest documents I had sealed from decades ago. The impressions were changing there too, moving, evolving. The Latin text shifted into new words. The fall approaches, betrayal comes, fire and chains await. I slammed the records shut, locked them away. That night, I dreamed of burning, of chains, of knights being led to execution. The seal waited on my desk again the next morning. Today's impression showed knights in chains. Soldiers with strange weapons surrounded them. I recognized the scene. Vision of something that hadn't happened yet, but would. I went to the preceptor, showed him the changing seals, the moving images, the prophetic text. He smiled, said I was working too hard, imagining things, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I returned to my desk, made another impression. The scene showed the preceptor himself, writing a letter. I could read the words in the tiny wax image. The Templars have grown too powerful. They must be destroyed. My hands shook so badly I dropped the seal. That night, I snuck into the preceptor's chamber, found the letter, written, exactly as the seal had shown. He was betraying us. I ran back to my office, grabbed the seal, had to destroy it, had to stop these visions. The metal burned my hands when I tried to break it. Images flashed in my mind. Knights arrested in their sleep, torture chambers, confessions extracted under pain, fires burning across France. I saw every detail of our orders coming destruction. I threw the seal across the room. It landed face up, made one final impression in a pool of spilled wax, showed me sitting in a cell, writing this account, waiting for the guards. They're coming now. I hear their boots on the stairs. The seal sits on my desk, still showing that last image. My hands are shaking as I write these final words. The seal told the truth about everything. The arrests will begin at dawn. Hundreds of knights taken in their beds. The trials will follow. The tortures, the executions. I've seen it. All in the wax impressions. Every detail, every horror, every death, including my own. The seal shows me that too, now. My last moments in the flames. I can't destroy it. Can't change what's coming. Can only write this warning. If you find this account, if you see the seal, don't touch it. Don't look at its images. Don't read its prophecies. Just run. But you won't, will you? You'll pick it up, press it to wax. Watch its visions unfold. See your own fate written in silver and blood. Just as I did, just as I'm doing now. The guards are at my door. The seal shows their faces clearly, shows what they'll do to me, shows everything that's coming, forever. The door is opening. The seal's final prophecy arrives, just as it showed, just as it always shows. Forever, the rest of the account was found in Brother Laurent's cell after his arrest. The seal itself was never located, but sometimes in dusty archives, researchers find old documents with strange impressions in the wax. Impressions that seem to move when you're not looking directly at them. Impressions that show things that haven't happened yet. Things that will happen. To the viewers, forever. Story 13. The chanting started after the third day without water. Low voices singing Gregorian hymns from all directions in the endless Syrian desert. 6 of us had left Damascus. Now only 4 remained. Listen. Brother Mark pointed into the swirling sand. The monastery must be that way. I am Brother Jean of the Knights Templar. I've crossed this desert 12 times. There are no monasteries here. No settlements, no singers. Just sand, sun, and now, voices. There is no monastery, I told him. The heat is affecting your mind. But I heard it too. Perfect 4-part harmony drifting through the air. The hymn of Saint Michael, sung in flawless Latin. Brother Mark stumbled toward the sound. His cracked lips moved in silent prayer. Stay together, I grabbed his arm. The skin felt hot even through his robe. The other 2 knights, Robert and Philip, stared into the storm. Their eyes were glazed, fevered. I hear them too, Philip whispered. Just like in the monastery at home. More voices joined the choir. The harmonies swelled. I recognized the melodies. Every hymn I'd sung since childhood. But they came from nowhere, from everywhere. We should follow them, Robert said. He took a step east. No, they're this way. Mark pulled west. South, Philip insisted. The voices are stronger there. The sand walled higher. The sun vanished behind clouds of dust. But the singing grew louder. Stay together, I shouted again. It's not real, they ignored me. Each one heard their own version of the chant. Each one followed a different direction. Mark, Robert, Philip, their names were lost in the wind. I saw their shapes disappear into the storm. 3 different directions, 3 different songs. Then I was alone. The singing surrounded me now. Dozens of voices, hundreds, every hymn I knew, all at once. The sound pressed against my skull like physical weight. I dropped to my knees, pressed my hands against my ears. The voices got louder. Our Father, who art in heaven. I tried to pray over them. The hymns changed. Now they sang my prayer back to me. 1,000 voices speaking my words. I stumbled to my feet, had to find the others. Mark. No answer but echoing chants. Robert, the voices grew louder. Philip, they were deafening now. I picked a direction and walked. The storm surrounded me. Sand filled my mouth, my eyes, but the singing never stopped. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time meant nothing in that howling void. Something dark loomed. Ahead, a building. I moved closer. The shape resolved itself. A monastery, impossible, but there it stood. Solid stone walls rising from the sand. Light glowed in its windows. The singing poured from its chapel. A figure stood in the doorway. A monk in Templar robes. Mark, Brother Jean, he waved. I found it. Come quickly. I stumbled toward him. My feet felt heavy. 10 steps away, I saw his face clearly. His eyes were empty sockets. His skin was dried leather stretched over bone. His mouth moved in the endless chant, but no breath came from his lungs. This thing wasn't Mark. I turned to run. Another figure blocked my path. Robert, the same empty sockets, the same dried flesh. A third appeared. Philip, or what had been Philip. They reached for me with skeletal hands. "Join us, Brother Jean," they sang in perfect harmony. "Join the eternal choir." I drew my sword. The blade passed through them like smoke. Their hands felt solid enough when they grabbed me. "Sing with us," they whispered. "Sing forever." I fought, kicked, screamed prayers. They dragged me toward the monastery. The doors stood open, revealing not a chapel, but an endless void of swirling sand. More hands reached from the darkness. More voices joined the choir. I recognized them all. Every night, every brother I'd known who had vanished in the desert over the years. All singing, all reaching, all dead. No, I tore free, ran. Their voices followed. I ran until my legs gave out, until the sand drank my blood and sweat, until my own voice joined their choir without my permission, until I fell. The storm cleared. A search party found me 2 days later, alone, half buried in sand. They said I was singing when they found me. Perfect Latin hymns in a 4-part harmony no single voice could produce. They said I didn't stop for 3 days. They said I shouldn't have survived. I didn't tell them about the monastery, about the choir of the dead. But sometimes, in the desert night, I hear them singing. Mark's voice, Robert's, Philip's, calling me to join them. And sometimes I catch myself answering, harmonizing with voices that shouldn't exist, adding my part to their eternal choir, practicing for the day I'll join them. The day we'll all join them, in that monastery of dust and bone, singing forever. The search parties still go out when brothers vanish in the storms. They find fewer bodies these days, but on quiet nights, if you stand at the desert's edge, you can hear the choir growing stronger. More voices joining every day, singing, waiting, calling us all to join them forever. I write this as a warning. If you cross the Syrian desert and hear familiar hymns on the wind, block your ears, close your mind, don't sing along, no matter how much you want to, no matter how beautiful the harmony, because once you add your voice to their choir, you'll never stop singing, never, forever. Story 14. The stranger knew today's password. That was impossible. We'd changed it at sunset, as we did every day. Only 5 people knew it. Myself, the preceptor, and 3 senior knights. Yet this man spoke it without hesitation. "Blessed are the peacemakers," he said quietly. My hand stayed on my sword hilt. "Who gave you that password?" "You did, Brother Raymond. Or rather, you will. I am the chief guard of Jerusalem's main gate. For 15 years, I've protected this entrance. I know every guard, every regular visitor, every merchant who passes through. I had never seen this man before. He wore simple traveler's clothes, no weapons, no insignia. His face was ordinary, forgettable. But his eyes looked ancient. "State your business," I said. To prevent a betrayal, he stepped closer. The torchlight didn't seem to touch him properly. "You're going to make a terrible mistake, Raymond. I'm here to stop you." My grip tightened on the sword. "How do you know my name?" "I know everything about you. I know that you have a sister in France who writes to you every month. I know that you killed 3 Saracen raiders last summer. I know that you're planning to sell information to them next week." The breath left my body. I hadn't told anyone about the Saracen messenger who'd approached me, about the gold he'd offered, about my agreement to help them. "You're wrong," I said, but my voice shook. "Am I?" He pulled a piece of parchment from his robe. This is the message. You'll send them. I remember every word, because I read it after they found your body. I snatched the parchment. The handwriting was mine. The words I hadn't written yet, but had planned to write. Who are you? I am you, Raymond. 20 years from now, after the guilt drove me to take my own life, I backed away. My legs hit the guard post wall. That's not possible. Look at my face. Really look. I did. Under the weathered skin, behind the grey hair. My features, my eyes, older, harder, but mine. No, I drew my sword. This is some trick. It's not. He pushed back his sleeve. A long scar ran up his forearm. You got this defending the gate from raiders 5 years ago. The wound never healed properly. I touched my own scar. Identical. Why are you here? To stop us from destroying everything. He stepped closer. The information you're planning to sell. It will lead to deaths. Brothers you've known for years. Friends, the guilt will eat at you until you can't bear it. I need the gold, I whispered. My sister is already dead. His voice was gentle. The letter telling you is on its way, but you'll sell the information before it arrives, thinking you're helping her. My knees gave out. I slid down the wall. You're lying. You know I'm not. He knelt beside me. I lived it, Raymond. I watched our brothers die because of what we did. I carried that guilt for 20 years before I found a way to come back, to stop us. How? My voice cracked. How? Did you come back? That doesn't matter. What matters is what you do now. He held out his hand. Give me the messages you've already written. Let me stop this before it begins. I reached for my tunic pocket, stopped. Prove you're really me. Tell me something only I would know. The prayer you say every night isn't to God, it's to Marie, the girl who died of fever when we were 16, the one we never told anyone about. My hands shook as I pulled out the messages. Everything I'd written. For the Saracens' battle plans, guard rotations, gate passwords. He took them. The parchments crumbled to dust in his hands. It's done, he said. The future is changed. What happens now? I don't know. My timeline ends here. He looked at his hands. They were becoming transparent. Keep faith, Brother Raymond. And remember, every choice matters. Wait. I grabbed for him, but my hand passed through his arm. I have questions. No time. His voice was fading. The gate. He vanished. The warning bell rang. Shouts came from the battlements. Raiders, a voice called, approaching from the east. I ran up the steps. Torches moved in the darkness. Dozens of them, an attack force. The same raiders I would have helped. Would have betrayed my brothers too. But not now. Sound the alarm, I shouted. Archers to the walls, seal the gate. The defense was organized quickly. Our arrows fell like rain. The raiders retreated, leaving their dead. Later, I found a letter waiting in my cell. News from France. My sister. He had told the truth about everything. That was 3 months ago. The raiders never returned. My brothers still live. The guilt I might have carried died unborn. Sometimes at night, I think I see him watching from the battlements. My older self, my conscience, my savior. But when I look again, he's gone. The passwords still change every sunset. But now, I'm more careful about who I share them with. After all, you never know when you might meet yourself at the gate. When your own future might come to judge your choices. When your conscience might wear your face. I keep the night watch now. watching, waiting, ready to stop anyone who might become what I almost became, ready to save them from themselves. Just as I was saved, just as I will always be saved. By myself, forever. The gate stands. The watch continues. And somewhere in time, a man with my face smiles, knowing his mission is complete, knowing I chose differently, knowing we both did, forever. Story 15. The first word I forgot was my mother's name. I was halfway through copying the 3rd page of the ancient codex, when it simply vanished from my mind. I put down my quill and tried to remember. Nothing came. I am Brother Thomas, a copyist for the Knights Templar. 3 days ago, they brought me this manuscript, leather-bound, written in a script I'd never seen before. The preceptor said it needed to be copied exactly, word for word. He didn't tell me what would happen when I did. Touched the original page. The parchment felt cold under my fingers. The ink seemed to shift and move when I wasn't looking directly at it. Black characters rearranged themselves like ants on the page. I picked up my quill again, dipped it in ink, continued copying. By sunset, I'd forgotten my father's face. That night in the dormitory, Brother Michael asked my name. I opened my mouth to answer and found I couldn't remember how to pronounce it. The syllables slipped away like water. Are you ill? He asked. I shook my head, pointed to my throat, pretended I'd lost my voice. He left me alone after that. They all did. The next morning, I couldn't remember which bed was mine. I stood in the dormitory doorway, staring at the row of identical cots. Brother Michael walked past without speaking, without looking at me. Had he forgotten me already? I returned to the scriptorium. The codex waited on my desk. More words had appeared on its pages overnight. Impossible words. Words that hurt my eyes to look at. I began copying again. What else could I do? By midday, I'd forgotten where I came from. By evening, I couldn't remember how I'd joined the order. The memories simply weren't there anymore. I checked the monastery's records that night. My name wasn't listed among the brothers. My signature was missing from the rolls. In the refectory, no place was set for me at dinner. The other monks looked through me when I tried to speak to them. Their eyes slid past as if I wasn't there. Back in the scriptorium, I found more new words in the codex. They crawled across the page like insects. Each one I copied seemed to erase something from my mind. I tried to stop copying. My hands wouldn't obey. The quill moved on its own, transcribing word after word. That night, I forgot how to pray. The next morning, my cell was empty. No bed, no personal items, as if I'd never lived there. In the chapel, I caught my reflection in a bronze cross. My face was blurry, undefined. I touched my cheeks. They felt soft, like wax. The codex had more pages now, hundreds more, each one filled with those crawling, shifting words. I copied them all. By sunset, I couldn't remember what the sun looked like. Brother Michael passed me in the corridor. When did we get a new copyist? I heard him ask another monk. What copyist? The other replied. I looked down at my hands. I could see the stone floor through them. The codex grew thicker every hour. New pages appeared faster than I could copy. Then, the words twisted and writhed on the parchment. I worked through the night. What else could I do? I had nowhere else to go. No one who remembered me. Dawn came, or did it? I couldn't remember what dawn looked like anymore. The scriptorium was different now. Shadows filled the corners. The walls seemed further away. Other desks appeared through the gloom. Dozens of them, hundreds. At each desk sat a figure, bent over a codex, copying, always copying. I recognized them, somehow. Other copyists, other brothers who had transcribed these words before me. They were transparent now. Like me, their faces were blank, featureless. They had forgotten what they looked like. "How long have you been here?" I tried to ask them. My voice made no sound. I had forgotten how to speak. The codex on my desk grew larger. The words multiplied. Bread spawned new words. They covered the pages like a plague of insects. I kept copying. What else could I do? Time passed, or did it? I couldn't remember what time felt like anymore. More copyists appeared at more desks. All transparent, all forgotten, all copying those endless, terrible words. Sometimes new brothers would enter the scriptorium. Solid ones, real ones. They would sit at a desk, begin to copy, begin to forget. I watched them fade, watched their memories drain away, watched them join our silent, endless task. The codex grew. It always grew. We copied. We always copied. I forgot my name. I forgot what names were. I forgot what forgetting meant. Now I sit at my desk. Now we all sit at our desks. The words crawl across the pages. We copy them. New brothers come. They fade. They join us. The words multiply. We copy them. We have no names. We have no faces. We have no memories. We have only the words, the endless, crawling words. Sometimes I think I remember something. A sun, a voice, a prayer. But then the words take those two. The codex grows. We copy. That's all we are now. All we ever were. All we ever will be. Copyists without names, without faces, without memories. If you find this account, leave this place. Run, but you won't. You'll sit at a desk, pick up a quill, begin to copy, begin to forget. Join us in our endless task. The words are waiting. They're always waiting. Forever. I cannot remember who I was when I began this account. I cannot remember why I wrote it. The words are calling. I must copy them. We must all copy them. Forever. The rest of the pages are filled with endless rows of twisted, crawling symbols that hurt your eyes to look at. Best to close the book now. Best to walk away. But you won't. You'll start reading, start copying, start forgetting. Join us. Story 16. The reliquary shifted 2 inches to the left overnight. I'm certain of it. I had measured its position carefully the evening before, marking its placement on the stone shelf with chalk. Now the marks didn't align. I am Brother Martin, newly ordained into the Knights Templar. 3 weeks ago, they gave me my first assignment. Catalogue the relics in the crypts beneath the Convento de Cristo in Tomar. A simple task, they said. Make a detailed inventory. Note any items that need repair or special care. They didn't mention the relics would move on their own. I checked my previous day's notes. The silver reliquary had contained a fragment of bone, supposedly from St. Maurice. I had documented its dimensions, weight, and ornamentation. I had drawn its position precisely. It had definitely moved. I pulled out my measuring string and checked again. 2 inches to the left. No doubt about it. My hands shook. as I made the new notation in my ledger. I had heard stories about the crypts beneath Tomar, every novice had, but I hadn't believed them. The torch sputtered in its bracket. The flame cast moving shadows across the rows of reliquaries, crosses, and sacred vessels that lined the vault walls. I moved to the next item. A golden crucifix studded with garnets. I measured it carefully, drew its position, noted its condition. When I returned the next morning, it had rotated 45 degrees. I spent an hour checking and rechecking my measurements. The crucifix had definitely turned. None of my marks matched. Brother Jerome. I called out to the senior monk, who was supposed to be supervising my work. No answer echoed in the crypt passages. I hadn't actually seen Brother Jerome for 2 days. I assumed he was busy with other duties. Now, I wondered. The torch flickered again. I grabbed it from the wall bracket and held it higher. The shadows retreated to the corners of the vault. That's when I noticed the footprints in the dust. They led from the reliquary shelf to the far wall, adult-sized prints, sandals like we all wore, but they stopped at the wall. Solid stone, no door, no passage. I touched the wall where the prints ended. Cold, rough stone. I pressed against it. Solid. The torch dimmed. Behind me, something scraped against stone. I spun around. The golden crucifix had moved again. As I watched, it rotated another few degrees. My heart pounded against my ribs. The ledger dropped from my numb fingers. More scraping sounds. All around now, reliquaries. Sliding. Crosses turning. Chalices shifting position. The torch went out. I fumbled for my flint, hands shaking so badly I could barely strike it. Sparks flew. The torch caught again. New footprints crossed the floor, fresh ones, leading to that same blank wall. Hello, my voice cracked. Is someone there? A whisper echoed from the darkness. Cataloging. I held the torch higher. Brother Jerome must keep cataloging. The voice came from behind me now. I turned slowly. A figure stood at the far end of the vault. White robes. Tonsured head, but wrong. Transparent, I could see the wall through its body. It raised a ghostly hand, pointed at my fallen ledger. The work must continue, it said in Brother Jerome's voice. Another figure appeared beside it. Then another, more monks, all transparent, all holding spectral ledgers and quills. The cataloging never ends, they whispered together. I backed away. My shoulder hit the wall where the footprints ended. The stone wasn't cold anymore, it felt warm, soft. I turned to look. The wall rippled like water. Hands reached out of the stone. Pale, translucent hands. They grabbed my arms. Join us, Brother Jerome's voice whispered. Help us catalog, forever. The hands pulled. The wall softened further. I screamed, dropped the torch, pulled against the hands. But they were stronger. The stone enveloped me like thick water. I couldn't breathe, couldn't fight. Then I was through. A new chamber opened before me. Vast, endless. Hundreds of monks moved through the space, all transparent, all working, measuring, recording, cataloging. Brother Jerome stood nearby, ghostly quill moving across a spectral ledger. Welcome, Brother Martin. Now you can help us properly catalog the collection. I don't understand, I said. My voice echoed strangely. When I looked down, I could see through my own body. The relics must be catalogued perfectly, another monk said. Every detail recorded, every position noted. It's sacred work. But it's impossible, I protested. They keep moving. Exactly, Brother Jerome smiled. That's why we can never stop. The work must continue, forever. He handed me a translucent ledger and quill. The relics move because they're alive, he explained. Sacred things have their own will, their own purpose. Our duty is to record their movements, all their movements, for eternity. How long have you been here? Time has no meaning here. There is only the work, the endless, sacred work. Other monks nodded, never looking up from their ledgers. I can't stay, I said. I have to go back. You already are back there, Brother Jerome said. Look, I turned. Through the rippling wall, I saw myself entering the vault, picking up a ledger, beginning to measure. That's not possible, I whispered. All times exist here, Jerome said. All catalogings, all measurements. We record everything, always. I watched my other self work, watched him notice the moved reliquary, watched him check his measurements, watched him see the footprints. Soon he will join us, Jerome said. Just as you did, just as you always do, just as you always will. No. But I was already raising my spectral quill, already opening my ghostly ledger. The work called to me, the endless, sacred work. I began to write. Through the wall, I watched myself discover the footprints again. Watched myself feel the wall soften again. Watched myself join us again. The cycle continued, would always continue. After all, the relics must be catalogued. The work must go on, forever. I'm still here now, still cataloguing, still measuring, still recording. If you visit the crypts beneath Tomar, you might see us. Ghostly figures with ledgers and quills, endlessly documenting the sacred collection. You might even see yourself among us. You will, eventually. The work must continue, after all. And we always need more help. Always, forever. Join us. Story 17. The old woman approached me at dawn, her walking staff tapping against the cobblestones. Sergeant, she said, why are we starting the journey again? We reached Santiago yesterday. I lowered my water skin and stared at her. We hadn't reached Santiago. We hadn't even left Pamplona yet. This was our first morning on the road. Sister Agnes, I said, you must be confused. We're just beginning our journey today. She shook her head. Grey hair escaped her hood. No, we arrived. Yesterday, I remember kneeling at the shrine. We all did, even you, Sergeant Henry. Other pilgrims were gathering for the morning departure. 20 of them, all preparing for the long walk to Santiago de Compostela. All beginning their journey, not ending it. I am Sergeant Henry of the Knights Templar. For 10 years, I have escorted pilgrims along the Camino de Santiago. I know every mile of the road, every stop, every danger. I know we hadn't reached Santiago yesterday. Rest a moment, I told. Sister Agnes, the morning air can play tricks on the mind. She clutched her staff tighter. I'm not confused, Sergeant. Ask the others. They'll remember too. I turned to the group. Does anyone else remember reaching Santiago yesterday? Hands raised. First 1, then 5, then 12. My mouth went dry. That's not possible. A merchant stepped forward. Jean from Toulouse. I remembered his name. I clearly remember arriving. The great cathedral. The evening mass. Why are we back in Pamplona? Others nodded. They described the cathedral, the shrine, Details they couldn't have known without seeing them. "We begin our journey today," I said firmly. Everyone prepared to move out. They muttered, but obeyed. We were soon on the road, 20 pilgrims and me, following the ancient path west. The morning passed normally. The sun rose, birds sang, feet crunched on gravel. Then I saw the tree. I stopped. The massive oak shouldn't have been there. It marked a rest point 3 days. "Ahead, not the first morning. Keep moving," I called out. My voice shook. We passed the tree. I touched its bark. Real, solid. An hour later, we reached an inn. I knew this inn. It was 5 days from Pamplona, not 1. The innkeeper greeted us. "Back again, so soon." "We've never been here," I said. "You stopped here yesterday," she insisted. "All of you." I remember the old woman's red shawl. Sister Agnes touched her red shawl and smiled. My hands trembled as I paid for bread and wine. We ate quickly and moved on. The road changed. Landmarks appeared out of order. A shrine that should have been weeks away stood beside the path. A bridge we'd already crossed waited ahead. The pilgrims noticed. They whispered among themselves. Night fell too quickly. The sun dropped as if pushed from the sky. We made camp. I posted guards, though I'd never needed them before on this stretch. In the darkness, Sister Agnes sat beside me. "It's happening again," she said. "What's happening? The day, the journey, it's all happening again." I gripped my sword hilt. "Go to sleep, sister. I'll try. But I'll wake up in Pamplona again." "We all will." She was wrong. She had to be wrong. I dozed, woke to dawn light. We were in Pamplona, the same square, the same morning. Sister Agnes approached with her tapping staff. "Sergeant," she said, "why are we starting the journey again? We reached Santiago yesterday." My legs gave out. I sat hard on the cobblestones. "This isn't possible," I whispered. But it was happening. Again we walked. Again the oak appeared. Again the inn. Again the too swift night. Again Pamplona. Days blurred. Each morning, the same square, the same conversations, the same wrong landmarks. I started marking my arm with my knife. 1 cut for each reset. By the 10th mark, I couldn't tell what was real anymore. By the 20th, I stopped counting. The pilgrims remembered more with each loop. They described future stops in perfect detail. They knew every turn of the path. "Why does this keep happening?" Jean from Toulouse asked me. I had no answer. Then, on what felt like the 100th reset, Sister Agnes said something different at dawn. "Sergeant," she said, "do you remember the ambush?" I stopped. "What ambush?" "The one that killed us all." Cold spread through my chest. "There was no ambush. There was, is, will be." She leaned on her staff. "That's why we're here. That's why we keep repeating. We need to remember. Remember what? How we died." Other pilgrims gathered. They nodded. "The bandits," Jean said. "They waited in the oak grove." "No," I said, but memories stirred. "You tried to save us," Sister Agnes continued. "You fought well, but there were too many." "Stop. We all died there," she said. "Under that oak tree we keep passing. That's not possible." I shouted. "I'm alive. You're alive. We're here, are we?" I looked at my arm. The knife marks were gone. Had they ever been there? "If we're dead," I said, "why do we keep returning to Pamplona?" "Because you won't let us move on," Jean said. "Your oath was to protect us, to see us safely to Santiago. You can't accept that you failed, Sister Agnes added. So you keep trying. You keep bringing us back to the beginning. But you all remember reaching Santiago. We remember what you want us to remember, she said. What you need us to remember, to keep trying. No, I backed away from them. This isn't real. Show us your wound, Sergeant, Sister Agnes said. What wound? The one that killed you. I looked down. Blood spread across my chest. An arrow protruded from my heart. No, I whispered. The square dissolved. We stood in an oak grove. Bodies lay everywhere. My body, their bodies. Blood soaked the grass. Let us go, Sergeant, Sister Agnes said. Let yourself go. We don't blame you. I was supposed to protect you. You did your best. She touched my arm. Her hand passed through it. It's time to rest. The grove faded. Light filled my vision. I saw the Cathedral of Santiago shining in the distance. Come, Sister Agnes said. Walk with us one last time, to the real ending. I looked at my pilgrims, my charges, my failures, my family. We walked together into the light. The loop was broken. The journey ended. We reached Santiago at last. The true Santiago, where all pilgrims finally rest, together forever. And this time, we didn't wake up in Pamplona. We were home. Story 18. The discrepancy jumped out from the ledger immediately. 300 silver marks, transferred from our vault in Acre to a merchant in Damascus. The transaction was dated yesterday. The signature at the bottom belonged to Brother Robert de Lyon. Brother Robert had been dead for 3 months. I am Brother Gisham, Chief Treasurer of the Templar Fortress in Acre. I've managed our banking operations here for 12 years. Every coin, every transfer, every transaction passes through my hands. Nothing moves without my knowledge. I pulled the previous month's ledger from the shelf. More transactions signed by Robert. 8 of them, all made after sunset. All perfectly documented. All impossible. My hands shook as I opened another book, and another. Each one contained new transactions, all signed by a dead man. The signature was unmistakable. I had worked with Robert for 6 years. I knew every curve and stroke of his hand. The bell rang for vespers. I ignored it. The other. Brothers would have to pray without me tonight. I needed answers. I lit fresh candles and spread the ledgers across my desk. The pattern was clear now. Every transaction occurred at midnight. Every signature was identical to identical. Living signatures show variation. These were perfect copies, down to the last detail. A knock at the door made me jump, enter. Brother Pascal, one of my clerks, stepped in. Brother Gisham, you missed Vespers. I found something strange in the accounts. I showed him the ledgers. Look at these signatures. He bent over the books. Brother Robert's work, but he's dead. Yes, I pointed to the dates. These were all made in the past 3 months. Pascal's face went pale. That's not possible. Yet here they are. I closed the ledgers. Tonight we're going to watch the vault. But be here at 11. Tell no one. He nodded and left quickly. I heard him cross himself as he walked away. The hours crawled by. I pretended to work on other accounts, but my eyes kept returning to Robert's signatures. I had watched him die, a fever that took him in 3 days. I had helped bury him myself. At 11, Pascal returned. We took up positions in the shadows of the vault chamber. The huge iron-bound door stood silent in the lamplight. No one could open it without the key I wore at my belt. Minutes passed. The fortress grew quiet around us. The first bell of midnight rang. The temperature in the chamber dropped suddenly. My breath frosted in the air. Second bell, the lamp flames dimmed. Third bell, a scraping sound came from the vault door. Fourth bell, the lock turned. I clutched my key ring. It hadn't moved. Fifth bell, the door swung open silently. Pascal grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my flesh. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, thin, wearing the white mantle of our order. It moved to my desk with fluid steps that didn't quite touch the floor. Sixth bell. The figure sat at my desk, picked up my quill, opened the ledger. Seventh bell. It began to write. Eighth bell. I recognized the profile, the shape of the shoulders, the way he held the quill. Ninth bell, Robert, I whispered. The figure paused in its writing. 10th bell. It turned towards us. 11th bell. Robert's face. Just as I remembered it. But wrong. Empty. His eyes were black holes in a paper-white face. 12th bell. He smiled. His teeth glinted like coins in the lamplight. "Gig'em," he said. His voice was dust and dry. "Parchment. Come, see my accounts." My legs moved without my permission. Pascal tried to hold me back, but his fingers slipped away. I approached the desk. Robert gestured to the ledger with a skeletal hand. "See how well I keep the books." His finger traced the lines of numbers. Everything balanced. Everything in order. "Just as you taught me. You're dead," I said. "Am I?" He looked down at himself. "Yet I still serve the order, still keep the accounts. The work must continue, mustn't it?" "No," I grabbed the ledger. "This isn't real. You can't be here. But I am here, every night, keeping the books in order, writing the transactions." His smile widened. "Would you like to see how?" He held out the quill. Dark liquid dripped from its tip. "Not ink. Take it," he said. "Write with me." My hand reached for the quill. I couldn't stop it. Pascal screamed behind me. The sound broke whatever force held me. I stumbled back. Robert stood. His movements were jerky now, like a puppet on strings. "The accounts must be kept, Guillaume. The work must continue. Someone must write. Not like this." I clutched my crucifix. "Go back to your rest, brother. Your service is done." He laughed. The sound was like coins falling on stone. "Done. The work is never done. The accounts must be balanced. The books must be kept." He moved towards me. "And if you won't write with me, you'll write instead of me." I backed away. My heel caught on the floor. I fell. Robert loomed over me. His face was changing. The skin stretched tight over bones. The eyes sank deeper into black sockets. "Your signature will do nicely," he said. "After all, you taught me everything I know." Pascal was praying in the corner. The words seemed to pain Robert. He flinched at each invocation. I joined the prayer. Robert's form wavered like smoke and wind. "The accounts," he whispered. "They must be kept." His figure dissolved into shadows. The temperature rose. The lamp flames brightened. The vault door swung shut with a boom. I lay on the floor, shaking. Pascal's prayers had become sobs. When I could stand, I went to my desk. The ledger was open to a new page. A fresh signature graced the bottom. My signature. I hadn't written it. I burned the ledger. Then all the others, containing Robert's midnight transactions. I watched them turn to ash in the courtyard brazier. That was a week ago. Last night, I found a new ledger on my desk. The first page bore my signature. I didn't write it. Tonight, I sit at my desk, waiting for midnight. The quill lies ready. Dark liquid drips from its tip. I can hear footsteps approaching. The accounts must be kept, after all. The work must continue. And soon, very soon, I'll be the one keeping them. Just like Robert taught me, forever. Story 19. The first step echoed at midnight. I heard it clearly. A boot on stone, coming up the western tower stairs. I was alone on watch. No one else was supposed to be there. My name is Gerard de Provence, and I've stood guard in this tower of Safford Fortress for 20 years. I know every crack in these walls, every loose stone on these steps. I know the sounds of this place. This sound didn't belong. It was my first night back on duty after the battle at Hatton. 3 months of recovery. The physicians said I was ready. My wounds had healed. But some nights, when I close my eyes, I still smell the blood and sand. The second step came exactly 30 heartbeats after the first. Another boot on stone. Slow, deliberate, like a man carrying a heavy burden. I raised my lantern. The stairwell remained dark below, just shadows and silence between footsteps. "Declare yourself," I called out. My voice bounced off the walls. No answer, just another step, and another. I drew my sword. The familiar weight steadied my hand. 20 years of night watches had taught me to trust my instincts. Something was wrong. The steps continued, steady, rhythmic. I counted them. The western tower had exactly 67 steps from bottom to top. Each footfall echoed in the darkness. Step 10. I could feel sweat running down my back despite the cold night air. Step 15. My mouth went dry. Step 20. Still no sign of anyone in the stairwell below. I backed away from the top of the stairs. Sword raised. "In the name of the temple, show yourself." The footsteps didn't pause. They kept coming. Regular as a heartbeat. Step 30. My hands were shaking now. The sword point wavered in the lantern light. That's when I heard the breathing. Heavy, labored, like a man who'd been fighting for hours. It came from the stairwell with the footsteps. I knew that breathing. I'd heard it 3 months ago, during the worst day of my life. Step 40. The breathing got louder, mixed with it now. The soft clink of mail links, the creak of leather armor. My back hit the tower wall. Nowhere else to retreat. Step 50. I could smell it now. Blood, sweat, hot sand, the battlefield. The footsteps reached the final turn in the stairwell. Any moment, whoever, whatever was climbing, would come into view. I raised my lantern higher. The light fell on chainmail first. Templar armor, covered in sand and blood. Then the white mantle, torn and stained red. Then the face, my face. But not as I saw it in mirrors now. This was my face from 3 months ago, on the day of the battle. Young, strong, unscarred, and dead. The thing wearing my face had a sword through its chest. Blood ran down its armor in streams that never reached the floor. Sand fell from its clothes with each movement, vanishing before it landed. It looked at me with my own eyes, empty eyes, battle-dead eyes. "You left us," it said in my voice. "You ran." No. The word came out as a whisper. I fought. I was wounded. You ran. The thing took another step toward me. While we died, you ran. I didn't run. I raised my sword. The point shook. I fought until I fell. I have the scars to prove it. "Show me," the thing said. I didn't move. Show me your scars, Gerard de Provence. Show me how you fought. My hands went to my tunic, pulled it aside, revealed the mass of scar tissue on my chest. The thing looked, tilted its head, reached up and touched its own chest, where the sword still protruded. "Ah, it," said, "so you did stay. You did fight. But then why do I remember you running?" "I don't know," my voice cracked. "I don't remember running, but you do remember dying." Cold spread through my chest. "What? You remember dying there, with us? With your brothers?" "I didn't die. I was wounded, but I lived. I recovered. I'm here now. Are you?" The thing took another step closer. Its blood dripped endlessly, never touching the stones. "Look again at your scars, Gerard." I looked down at my chest, at the scar tissue, at the sword blade protruding through it. "No," I staggered back. "No, this isn't real. I lived. I recovered. Did you?" The thing was very close now. "Or did you just wish so hard to live that you forgot about dying?" My legs gave out. I slid down the wall to sit on the cold stones. The sword I'd been holding clattered beside me. When had I let it go? Every night, the thing said, "You climb these steps. Every night you stand this watch. Every night you tell yourself you survived." But I did survive. I'm here now. Yes, you're here now. Just like you were here last night. And the night before. And every night since the battle. It knelt in front of me, reached out with a bloody hand. "How many nights has it been, Gerard?" I tried to count. The nights blurred together, an endless succession of watches, of climbing these steps, of standing guard. "I don't know," I whispered. 3 months of nights, it said in my voice. 3 months of watching. 3 months of pretending you lived, but the physicians, they treated my wounds. Did they? Or do you just remember them treating you? I closed my eyes. Tried to remember the physicians. Their faces blurred, their voices faded. "The other brothers," I said. "They see me, they speak to me, do they? When was the last time anyone spoke directly to you? When was the last time anyone touched you?" I couldn't remember. "Open your eyes, Gerard." I did. The thing wearing my face was gone. But my reflection showed in the window glass. Young, strong, unscarred. A sword blade protruded from my chest. I watched as blood ran down my armor, as sand fell from my clothes, as my eyes turned empty and battled it. I heard footsteps on the stairs below, coming up, regular as a heartbeat. I turned to look. Another night, another watch, another chance to pretend I had survived. The footsteps reached the first step. I knew there would be 67 of them. There always were. I sat in my corner and waited to meet myself again, to relive the truth again, to die again. After all, that's what ghosts do. The second footstep echoed in the darkness. 65 more to go. I had time to remember now, time to understand. I am Gerard de Provence, and I died at Hattin 3 months ago. But every night I climb these steps. Every night I stand this watch. Every night I remember. The footsteps continue climbing. They always do. They always will. After all, what else can a dead man do but repeat his final duty, step by step, night after night, forever? Another footstep echoes in the darkness. I close my eyes and wait to meet myself again. The watch continues. It always will. Story 20. The parchment felt wrong under my fingers. Not old, like the hundreds of other manuscripts I'd handled in the scriptorium. Different, cold. I pulled my hand back and watched the corner curl up again, refusing to lie flat on the wooden desk. Brother Morris had brought it to me that morning. Found in the ruins near the old city walls, he'd said, the preceptor wants it translated by the month's end. He'd dropped it on my desk without ceremony and walked away. Was Thomas of York, scribe of the Knights Templar at our fortress in Antioch. My job was simple: translate texts from Greek, Arabic, and Hebrew into Latin for our archives. I'd been doing it for 3 years without incident, until that manuscript. The first page contained a standard introduction in classical Greek. Location details, dates, names of witnesses. I noted them mechanically in my translation log. Nothing unusual. Standard practice for any legal document from the region. The second page changed. Everything. On this day, 16 brothers of the temple will gather in the eastern tower. I wrote the translation, then stopped. Today was Tuesday. 16 brothers were scheduled to meet in the eastern tower that evening to discuss supply routes. I hadn't known that until I read it in a manuscript that was at least 50 years old, judging by the parchment quality and ink fade. My hands shook as I lit another candle. The sun was setting, and the scriptorium grew dark quickly this time of year. I forced myself to continue translating. The youngest among them will speak of visions in his sleep. Brother Stephen had mentioned his nightmares at breakfast. He was our newest member, barely 20 years old. I closed the manuscript and walked to the window. In the courtyard below, brothers were heading to the evening meal. Normal activities, normal day. I was imagining connections that weren't there. Too many hours hunched over texts, seeing patterns in randomness. I returned to my desk and opened the manuscript again. The words seemed to shift slightly before settling on the page. The grain stores will be found rotted on the 3rd day. I wrote that line in my log, closed the book, and went to dinner. I didn't sleep that night. 3 days later, Brother Gerard burst into the morning prayer service. The grain, the whole storeroom, it's all ruined. I threw up in the garden afterward. The manuscript had known. Back in the scriptorium, my hands trembled as I opened it. The next page, the Greek text flowed across the parchment like water, almost moving under my gaze. 7 birds will fall dead in the courtyard, a sign of what follows. That afternoon, I watched from my window as 7 crows dropped from the sky, their bodies hitting the stones with dull thuds. Brothers rushed out to examine them, making signs against evil. No one could explain it. I started locking the manuscript in my chest each night, but I could feel it there as I tried to sleep, pulsing like a heart behind the wooden slats. The next passage took me 2 days to translate. The Greek was archaic, full of obscure regional variants. The one who reads these words will begin to see his own death approaching. First in dreams, then in shadows, finally in mirrors. That night, I dreamed of myself lying on the scriptorium floor, blood pooling under my head. I woke up screaming. The next day, I saw a shadow on the wall that looked like my body, hanging from the ceiling beams. It disappeared when I blinked. In the water basin the following morning, my reflection showed deep gashes across my throat. When I touched my neck, my skin was smooth. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. The translations consumed me. Each new passage revealed another event. A visiting knight's horse went lame exactly where the text described. Brother Morris found a golden chalice buried in the garden, just as the manuscript said he would. The well water turned bitter for 3 days, as predicted. On page 7, other scribes noticed my deterioration. "You look unwell, Brother Thomas," they'd say. "Perhaps you should rest." But I couldn't stop. The manuscript's predictions pulled me forward, each new translation revealing another piece of our immediate future. I had to know how it ended. The final pages were the hardest. The Greek deteriorated into an obscure dialect I'd only seen in the oldest texts. I spent weeks on single paragraphs, checking and rechecking my translations. The reader approaches his ending, one passage read. As he reveals these final words, his fate reveals itself. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my quill. Ink splattered across the translation log. In the hour of completeness, when the last word is known, the reader's blood will join the words. I translated that line at sunset. The scriptorium was empty except for me. Shadows crept across the floor like grasping fingers. One paragraph remained. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs. As I began to translate, he sits at his desk in the fading light. His quill moves across the page, revealing these very words. Behind him, the door opens silently. Footsteps approach, unheard. The knife rises. The reader becomes the final prophecy, his ending written before his beginning. I heard the door creak. I felt the rush of air from movement behind me. I saw the knife's shadow fall across my translation. I tried to turn. The blade was very sharp. I hardly felt it across my throat. My blood soaked into the manuscript, just as it had foretold. The Greek text absorbed it eagerly, the words seeming to drink it in. As my vision darkened, I saw new words forming in crimson letters. The next reader approaches. The cycle begins again. They found my body in the morning, slumped over my desk. The translation log was complete. The manuscript was gone. But in other fortresses, in other scriptoriums, scribes sometimes receive ancient texts that need translation, manuscripts that feel cold to the touch, parchments that tell of things not yet happened. And as they begin to read, the words begin to move, and the future unfolds, one translation at a time. I know this because the manuscript told me so in its final passage, the one written in my blood. The one I pray no other scribe will ever have to translate. But they will. They already have. They always do. That's what the manuscript promised. And its predictions, as I learned at the cost of my life, always come true. The new scribe who recorded this account found it written in his own hand one morning, though he had no memory of writing it. When he looked in the mirror that day, he saw blood on his collar. When he touched his neck, his skin was smooth. On his desk was a manuscript that needed translation. The parchment felt cold under his fingers. Story 21. The parchment stank of death. Not the sweet decay of aged vellum, but something older, earthier. I noticed at the moment Brother Raymond placed the manuscript on my desk in the scriptorium of our Antioch fortress. My fingers trembled as I touched the leather binding. Found in the ruins of St. Paul's, he said. The Grand Master wants it translated by month's end. The binding cracked when I opened it. Syriac script filled the pages, dense and precise. The ink was brown, not black. I had seen enough manuscripts to know this wasn't ordinary oak gold ink. This was different. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, I sit in my cell at midnight, staring at the wall where my own handwriting bleeds through the stone. Words I haven't translated yet. Words that shouldn't be there. The first signs appeared 5 days after I began the translation. The text was difficult, an account of something called the Vigil of the Sealed Tomb. I had worked late into the night, my eyes burning from squinting at the faded script by candlelight. When I finally looked up to rest my eyes, I saw it. There, on the whitewashed wall, a single line of text in my own hand. The same precise strokes I had been practicing all day. I approached the wall. The writing was fresh, the ink still glistening. I touched it. My fingers came away clean. There was no ink, but the words remained. They were from a section I hadn't translated yet. Something about a sacrifice in the temple depths. I told no one. What? Would I say that words were appearing on my walls? They'd think I'd gone mad from too many hours of study. Maybe I had. I decided to ignore it and focus on my work. The next night, there were 2 lines, then 3. Each time, text I hadn't yet translated. Each time, in my own hand. Perfect copies of how I would write them. How I did write them, days later when I reached those sections. I began to dread sundown. The words always appeared at night, always on the same wall, always prophetic, showing what I would translate in the days ahead. I started transcribing them before they faded with the dawn, comparing them to the manuscript's text. When I eventually reached those passages, they matched every time. Last night, the wall filled completely, floor to ceiling. My handwriting crawled across the stone. I lit every candle I had and copied it all frantically before sunrise. The words told of a chamber beneath the fortress, a sealed room that held something ancient, something that had been waiting. The text described its location precisely. Through the lowest storage cellar, behind the 3rd wine rack, a loose stone conceals a passage. I know it's there. I checked this morning while the other brothers were at prayer. The stone moves just as the manuscript said it would. Tonight, more words appeared. They spoke of what I would find in that chamber. What was sealed away there. What has been calling to me through the manuscript's pages. But there was something else on the wall. This time, something new. A date, tomorrow's date. And beneath it, an account of my death. Written in my own hand, in words I haven't translated yet. Words I know I will translate tomorrow, in what the manuscript says will be my final hours. The strange ink on the manuscript's pages makes sense to me now. I know what they used to write it. I know because the words on my wall have begun to change color. They're turning from black to brown. The same shade as dried blood. Brother Raymond is at my door. He's concerned that I've missed devotions 3 days in a row. He doesn't understand the importance of my work. The manuscript has chosen me. It needs me to complete the translation, to open the chamber, to ensure what was written will come to pass. The knock comes again. Brother Thomas, are you well? I don't answer. I'm too busy studying the wall, where new words are appearing even now. Words that speak of Brother Raymond's fate. Words I will translate tomorrow, written in ink that has yet to dry. My hands shake as I copy them down. The quill scratches against the parchment, matching the scraping sounds I hear coming from behind the walls. They're getting louder, closer. The manuscript rests open on my desk, its pages crackling with anticipation. I know what I have to do now. The walls have told me everything, every step I must take, every word I must speak when I open the chamber, every detail of the ritual that will complete what was started centuries ago. Brother Raymond's knocking has stopped. The silence feels heavy, expectant, like the manuscript's pages, like the darkness behind the chamber's sealed door, like the weight of all the words yet to be translated, all the prophecies yet to be fulfilled. I pick up my quill again. There are more words appearing on the wall. I recognize the opening lines of the final passage, the one I've been avoiding, the one that speaks of what emerges when the seal is broken. The scratching behind the walls grows louder, more insistent. They know I'm reading their words now. They know I understand what must be done, what I will do, what I've already done, according to the words that keep appearing. My candle gutters, the flame dances, casting shadows that seem to form letters on the floor. More text, more prophecies, more of my handwriting, spreading like ink across the stone. I've stopped trying to copy it all down. There's no need. I know how this ends. The wall has shown me. Tomorrow, I will translate the final pages. Tomorrow, I will speak the words that open the chamber. Tomorrow, I will fulfill what was written. The manuscript doesn't lie. Every word that has appeared on my walls has proven true. Every prophecy has come to pass exactly as foretold. My death will be no different. I can hear them clearly now. The scratching has become a whisper. The whisper has become words. My words, the ones I'll translate tomorrow, the ones that are appearing on my walls right now, bleeding through the stone in letters formed by my own hand. The candle goes out. In the darkness, I feel the manuscript's pages flutter, like a pulse, like breathing, like anticipation. Morning will come soon. Brother Raymond will return with others. They'll break down the door when I don't answer. They'll find the manuscript open on my desk, the final pages still untranslated. They'll see the walls covered in my handwriting, prophecies of things yet to come, growing darker as they dry. But they won't find me. The words have already told me where I'll be, what I'll become, what the manuscript will make of me when I complete my task. The darkness is complete now, but I can still see the words appearing. They glow faintly, written in something that pulses like cooling embers, like dying stars, like eyes opening in the void. I reach for my quill one last time. There are words that need to be copied, prophecies that must be preserved, truths that must be passed on. The manuscript has chosen me for this task. The walls have shown me the way. Tomorrow, I will translate the final page. Tomorrow, I will open the chamber. Tomorrow, I will become what the words have foretold. The scratching is inside my cell now, inside my head. The words flow faster, covering every surface. My hands move on their own, copying passages I haven't read yet, writing my own ending before it happens. I understand now why they used blood for ink. Some truths can only be written in life itself. Some prophecies must be fulfilled in flesh. The manuscript lies open, waiting. The walls whisper my fate. The darkness grows thicker, heavier, like ink pooling on parchment. Tomorrow they will find these words. Tomorrow they will read of what happened here. Tomorrow they will understand. But by then it will be too late. The translation will be complete. The chamber will be open. And I will have become what the manuscript promised, what the walls foretold, what was written in my own hand, in words I have yet to translate. The final prophecy appears before me now. I recognize my handwriting, though I haven't written these words yet. They tell of what I am about to become. The darkness takes form. The scratching becomes a voice. The manuscript's pages turn on their own, revealing the last passage. The one I will translate tomorrow. The one that will end everything and begin it all again. The words on the wall are complete now. My story is written. Tomorrow's translation awaits. I pick up my quill for the last time. The manuscript has shown me what must be done. It's time to fulfill what was written. Story 22. The crypt beneath Acre Fortress stank of old bones and salt water. 7 nights. That was my punishment for questioning the Grand Master's orders during the last siege. 7 nights alone in this pit, keeping vigil over the dead. My knees pressed against the cold stone floor. The torch in its wall bracket cast the only light. I'd been here 3 hours. 4 more until dawn, then 6 more nights to go. Something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned my head sharply. Just shadows, dancing on the wall from the torch flame. My hand gripped the hilt of my sword tighter. I'd fought in 6 battles, led charges against Saracen lines, watched brothers die screaming. But something about this place made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the silence, the kind of silence that feels like a physical weight. The torch sputtered. The shadows on the wall shifted. For a moment, they looked like a man kneeling in prayer. I blinked hard. The shape disappeared. My mind was playing tricks. That's what happened in the dark. Brother Gerald had told me about night vigils, how the mind starts to wander, how the shadows start to move. But he never mentioned the whispering. It started as a faint sound, like wind through cracks in the stone. But there was no wind down here. No drafts, just still, stagnant air that smelled of decay. The whispers grew louder. Words in Latin. I couldn't make them out clearly. My breath quickened. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill. The shadows moved. Again, this time I was sure of it. They formed the shape of a knight, fully armored, kneeling before the altar. Then another, and another. A row of shadow knights, heads bowed in prayer. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 10, opened them again. The shadows remained. 7 knights, 7 dark silhouettes cast against the wall. But the torch could only cast my shadow. I was alone down here. I knew I was alone. The whispers became clearer. Fratrim progitor, brother traitor. My hands shook. The voices knew. They knew what I'd done at the siege of Arsef. The men I'd left behind when I retreated. Brothers who'd trusted me to lead them. No, I said aloud. My voice echoed off the stone walls. It was a tactical withdrawal. I saved more lives than I lost. The Shadow Knights turned their heads toward me. The movement was wrong, jerky, unnatural. Their features were indistinct except for their eyes. 7 pairs of eyes that glowed like dying embers. I tried to stand. My legs wouldn't move. The cold from the stone floor had seeped into my bones. Or maybe it was fear that paralyzed me. The shadows began to point. Not at me, at something on the floor. A flagstone near the altar. It looked different from the others, older. A strange symbol was carved into its surface, almost worn away by time. The whispers grew urgent. The Shadow Knights kept pointing. The torchlight dimmed, but their eyes glowed brighter. I recognized one of the faces now. Brother Michel. He'd died at Arsef, holding the line I'd abandoned. His shadow face twisted in accusation. I had no choice, I whispered. The line was broken. We were surrounded. Another face became clear. Brother Thomas, then Brother William, all men who'd died under my command. All men I'd failed. The flagstone they pointed to began to shift. Just slightly, a thin line of darker darkness seeped from its edges. The whispers became a chant. Words I knew from the old texts, the ones we weren't supposed to read. My teeth chattered, not from cold now, but from pure animal terror. I wanted to run, to climb the stairs and never look back. But my body wouldn't respond. I could only kneel there, watching as the shadows gathered around the flagstone. They began to kneel, one by one, forming a circle around the stone. The chanting grew louder. The darkness seeping from the edges of the stone began to take shape. It rose like smoke, but thicker, heavier. I recognized the next face. Brother Gerald. But he wasn't dead. I'd seen him at Vespers just yesterday. The shadow of Brother Gerald smiled. Not the warm smile I knew. Something else, something hungry. The darkness from the stone touched my knee. It felt cold, solid. My sword clattered to the floor from nerveless fingers. 7 nights, the shadows chanted. 7 nights, 7 sins to be answered for. I did what I had to do, I said. But the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. The shadow of Brother Gerald spoke alone now. Tomorrow you'll see. Tomorrow at Vespers, watch me closely, brother. Watch what happens when the truth is revealed. My whole body shook. What truth? The truth of Arsef. The real reason you ordered the retreat. The gold you took from the Saracen messenger the night before. The breath froze in my lungs. No one knew about that. No one could know. How we know all the secrets of those who hold vigil here. We see the darkness in their hearts, just as we see yours. The other shadows began to move closer. Their eyes burned. Brighter, their hands reached for me with fingers like smoke. 7 nights, they chanted. 7 nights, 7 sins. The darkness from the stone covered my legs now. I couldn't feel them anymore. My chest tightened. Each breath was a battle. What do you want from me? Brother Gerald's shadow knelt before me. Confession, brother, truth. And then what? Then justice. The shadows surged forward. The torch went out. But I could still see their eyes in the darkness. Still hear their whispers, still feel their cold touch as they reached for my heart. I screamed. The sound echoed off the walls, came back distorted, changed into laughter, their laughter. When they found me the next morning, I was still kneeling, still staring at the flagstone, still feeling the cold touch of shadow fingers on my skin. I attended Vespers that evening, watched as Brother Gerald was arrested, watched as they found the letters in his cell, the evidence of his own betrayal, his own deal with the Saracens. He screamed as they dragged him away, called me a demon, a shadow walker, said I'd framed him. That night, I returned to the crypt. 6 more nights of vigil remained. The shadows were waiting. 7 nights, 7 pairs of glowing eyes. But Brother Gerald's face was no longer among them. A new shadow knelt in his place. Its face was hidden, but I knew what I'd see when it looked up. My own features twisted by darkness. My own eyes glowing like dying embers. 6 more nights. 6 more secrets to uncover. 6 more brothers to join the shadows on the wall. I knelt before the flagstone. The whispers began again. The darkness seeped from the edges of the stone. Cold fingers reached for my heart. And somewhere in the darkness, I heard Brother Gerald screaming. The vigil continues. Each night, the shadows reveal another truth, another betrayal, another brother who must face justice. They say confession is good for the soul. But down here, in the dark, with the watching, confession is only the beginning. 6 more nights, 6 more secrets, 6 more souls to join the vigil. And then, perhaps, my own sins will finally be answered for. The torch sputters, the shadows move, the whispers begin again. And I kneel in the darkness, waiting to see what truths will be revealed tonight. Story 23. I counted the gold pieces 3 times before securing the payment in my belt pouch. The merchant bowed and backed away from my desk in the Templar treasury at Tyre. The letter of credit will be honored in Jerusalem, I said. Show it to Brother Arnaud at the Temple Mount compound. After he left, I locked the gold in the strong room and returned to my quarters. A message from the commander waited on my desk. My blood ran cold as I read it. Sergeant Jeffrey, you will escort the sealed reliquary to Jerusalem. Leave at first light. Travel alone. Tell no one. The contents are sacred. The reliquary sat in the corner of my room. A wooden box reinforced with iron bands, small enough to fit in my saddlebags. No markings except the Templar cross burned into the lid. I'd seen it brought in 3 nights ago by 2 knights who wouldn't meet my eyes. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. The box seemed to hum in the darkness, a low sound at the edge of hearing. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of chanting. Dawn came too soon. I strapped on my sword, checked my waterskins, and secured the reliquary in my saddlebags. The guards at the fortress gate nodded as I rode out. They didn't ask questions. Templars learned not to ask questions. The coastal road would have been faster, but the commander's notes specified the desert route, more isolated, safer from bandits, he'd said. But bandits weren't what worried me. The sun climbed higher. Sweat soaked my tunic under my mail. Shirts the horse's hooves kicked up dust that coated my throat, and all the while I heard the chanting. At first I thought it was just the wind, or my mind playing tricks. But it grew clearer as the morning wore on. Latin hymns, sung by male voices. Coming from my saddlebags, I stopped and dismounted, opened the bags with shaking hands. The chanting grew louder when I touched the reliquary. The wood felt warm, too warm for the morning air. In Narmian Patrice, the voices sang, clear as chapel. Bells now, it Filii, it Spiritus, Sancti. I slammed the bags shut. The singing muffled but didn't stop. My horse shifted nervously, sensing my fear. We rode on. The sun beat down. The chanting continued. I found myself mouthing the words without meaning to. Ancient prayers, calls for deliverance, pleas for mercy. Near midday, I saw a stand of scrub trees, shade, water maybe. I turned toward it. The chanting changed, became harsh, warning. My horse balked. When I tried to spur him forward, he reared. I barely kept my seat. Fine, I said aloud. We'll stay on the path. The voices softened, became almost gentle, guiding me. The horse calmed. Hours passed. The sun began to set. I needed to make camp, but my hands shook every time I thought about stopping, about being alone in the dark with that box and those voices. A shape appeared on the horizon, a caravanserai not on my map. The chanting rose to a fever pitch. I tried to steer toward it. Again the voices turned harsh. Again, my horse fought me. It's shelter, I argued with the empty air. We need rest. The chanting became a scream. My horse reared again, nearly throwing me. When I looked back at the caravanserai, it was gone. Just empty desert. Night fell. The stars came out. Still, I rode on, following the chanting. The voices seemed to know the way better than I did. My water ran low. My body ached. The horse stumbled with exhaustion. But every time I tried to stop, the voices drove us forward. The moon rose. The reliquary grew hotter in my saddlebags. I felt its heat through my leg. The singing reached a crescendo. Something moved in the darkness ahead. I drew my sword. The blade gleamed in the moonlight. A group of riders emerged from the shadows. 8 men on desert horses, curved swords at their sides. Saracens. I turned to flee. The chanting stopped me, turned me back to face them. The raiders approached. I raised my sword, ready to die fighting. They were 20 paces away, then 10, then 5. The chanting exploded from my saddlebags. No longer muffled, no longer just voices. Pure sound that hit like a physical force. The raiders' horses screamed, reared, threw their riders and bolted. The men covered their ears and fell to their knees. Blood trickled from their noses, their eyes. They crawled away into the darkness, leaving weapons and supplies scattered in the sand. The chanting softened again, almost pleased. My horse trembled, but held his ground. We rode through the night. I lost track of time, lost track of direction. Just followed the voices guiding me through the desert. False dawn painted the sky gray. Jerusalem's walls appeared on the horizon. The chanting changed again. Triumph, victory, joy. The guards at Damascus gate stopped me, asked my business. I showed them my Templar cross. They waved me through. The streets were empty in the pre-dawn darkness. My horse knew the way to the Temple Mount. The voices urged us on. Brother Arnaud waited at the compound gate. His face was grey with exhaustion, like he hadn't slept in days. "You made it," he said. "We've been watching for you, watching the dreams. We all had them, saw you coming, heard the singing." My hands shook as I lifted the reliquary from my saddlebags. It burned my fingers through my gloves. "Take it," I said. "Complete your task." He clutched the box to his chest. The chanting grew louder. Other brothers emerged from the shadows, formed a circle around us, joined the singing. "You don't want to know what's inside," Arnaud said. "Trust me." I looked at their faces in the growing light, saw the same haunted look in every eye. They knew they'd seen. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you join us," Arnaud said. "Now you keep the vigil. Now you protect the secret." "What secret?" He smiled, a hollow expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Listen," he said. "Just listen." The chanting filled my head. Words I didn't know, but somehow understood. Truths I couldn't comprehend, but couldn't deny. Arnaud opened the reliquary. Just a crack. Just enough. Inside was a mirror. Ancient bronze, green with age. In its surface, I saw my reflection. My face looked back at me, but older, much older, with eyes that had seen centuries pass. Eyes that knew what the voices sang about. I understood then, understood why they'd chosen me to carry it, why the voices had guided me, why I couldn't stop hearing them even now. The mirror showed what I would become, what we all became, in time. Guardians, watchers, singers of the ancient songs. They led me into the depths beneath the Temple Mount, down to the chamber where the real reliquary waited, the one this copy had been leading me to. The voices sing louder now, day and night, teaching me the words, teaching me the truth. Soon I'll be ready, ready to join the eternal vigil, ready to guide the next bearer across the desert, ready to become one of the voices in the reliquary. The singing goes on, and I sing with them, waiting for the next guardian to hear our call. Story 24. The confessional booth in Safe Fortress was smaller than the one in Acre. No window between penitent and priest, just a thick wooden wall with a small grate. The summer heat made the space feel like an oven. I'd been here 3 days. New conquest meant new confessions. The commander insisted every soldier and servant in the fortress confess. Before we formally consecrated the chapel, Brother Martin brought the first penitent just after prime. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," a rough voice said through the grate. A soldier, by the sound of it. Standard confession, pride, anger, the usual sins of fighting men. I assigned penance and sent him on his way. The second penitent arrived shortly after. Another soldier, similar sins. The third came at midday, then the fourth. It was the fifth confession when things changed. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," said a young voice. One of the squires. "Speak, my son." He paused, breathed heavily. I took it. The silver chalice from the altar, but I put it back. Before my hand froze in the act of making the sign of the cross. Before what? Before the blood filled it. My skin went cold despite the heat. What blood? The blood that will flow when we break our oaths, when we betray our brothers. I pressed closer to the grate. The squire's face was just a shadow. "What betrayal do you speak of?" But he was gone. The booth creaked, empty. I threw open my door. Brother Martin stood outside. "The boy who just left," I said. "Where did he go? What boy?" "No one's been here since the 4th bell." My hands shook as I closed the door. Too much sun, perhaps. Too little sleep. The next penitent entered moments later. An older man, by his voice. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." I took the silver chalice. My blood went cold. The exact same words. From the altar I finished, before the blood filled it. Silence from the other side of the wall. Then, you know what's coming. What's coming. The betrayal, the breaking of oaths, the blood in the chalice. I stood up so fast I hit my head on the low ceiling. Threw open my door again. Empty booth, empty courtyard. Brother Martin dozed in the shade. "Martin, did you see?" He startled awake. "What? No one's been here, Father. Not since the 4th bell." I spent the rest of the day in my cell, praying, trying to make sense of it. The next morning, more penitents came. Every one of them confessed to stealing the silver chalice. Every one spoke of blood and betrayal. Everyone vanished when I tried to question them further. Brother Martin saw none of them. By the 3rd day, my hands shook constantly. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The same confession played over and over in my mind. I went to the chapel after Compline. The silver chalice sat on the altar, catching the last light through the windows. I reached for it. My fingers passed through it like smoke. The real chalice was locked in the sacristy. I'd seen Brother Martin put it there myself. A sound behind me. Footsteps on stone. "They're showing you what's coming," said a voice. Brother Thomas, the old chaplain who'd died during the siege. I turned. The chapel was empty. Who's showing me? The ones who came before. The ones who saw. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Saw what happens when faith fails. When brothers turn against brothers. When oaths are broken. More footsteps. More voices. Look in the chalice, they whispered. See what we saw. I approached the altar. The chalice was solid now, real, full of dark liquid. Blood of the betrayed, the voices said. Blood of the forsworn. I looked inside. The liquid showed me things. Terrible things. Brothers fighting brothers. Betrayal, death, the fall of our order. When I looked up, the chapel was full of figures. Transparent shapes in Templar robes. Their faces were familiar. Men I'd seen in paintings, in ancient chronicles. We tried to warn them, Brother Thomas said. Through the confessional, through the dreams. But they wouldn't listen. Warn them about what? The future, the betrayal, the king who will turn, the pope who will break his word, the trials, the burnings. My legs gave out. I fell to my knees. When soon, very soon, unless what? The ghosts began to fade. Unless you hear the confessions, the real ones. Not the sins they speak, but the sins they will commit. How? Listen with more than ears. See with more than eyes. The confessional shows what will be, not what is. They vanished. The chalice was empty again. The next morning, I returned to the confessional. The first penitent entered. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. But this time, I heard the words behind the words, saw the truth behind the shadow, through the grate. This man would betray us to the king's men. That one would testify falsely against his brothers. Another would break under torture and condemn innocents. Each confession showed me more of what was coming. Each penitent revealed another piece of our future. By sunset, I knew everything. The arrests, the charges, the executions. I wrote it all down. Every detail, every name, every betrayal yet to come. Brother Martin found me in my cell, surrounded by pages of testimony. Father, are you well? I looked at him, really looked, saw what he would become, what he would do. Tell me, brother, I said, about the silver chalice. He blinked. What chalice? The one you'll steal. The one that will fill with blood when you betray your oaths. His face went white. How did you confess, my son? Not what you have done, but what you will do. He fell to his knees, began to speak. I wrote down every word, every future sin, every betrayal yet to be borne. The confessions continue. Day after day, they come to my booth. Day after day, I record their future crimes. The ghosts watch from the chapel corners. The chalice fills and empties with visions, and I listen. Listen to the sins that haven't happened yet. Listen to the future bleeding through the confessional grate. Soon the betrayals will begin. Soon the arrests will come. But this time we'll be ready. This time we'll know who to trust, who to watch. This time the future they showed me won't come to pass, unless the sin they warned me about wasn't theirs at all. Unless the betrayal they showed me was my own. I looked down at the pages of testimony, at the names I've gathered, at the future crimes I've recorded, and I wonder whose confession I should have been hearing all along. The ghosts gather in the corners, the chalice fills with blood, and through the confessional grate, I hear my own voice begin to speak. Story 25. The numbers didn't add up. I'd checked them 3 times now. hunched over my desk in the Paris Temple treasury. The letters of exchange from our commandery in Acre showed impossible sums, money appearing from nowhere, transactions that couldn't exist. I pulled another document from the pile. The signature at the bottom made my hands shake. Brother Thierry de Montfort, dead at Hattin 2 years ago. I was there, I saw him fall. But here was his signature, fresh and black, on a letter. Dated last week. The candle on my desk guttered. Shadows danced across the parchment. For a moment, the ink seemed to move, flowing like blood across the page. I picked up the next letter. Another dead man's signature. Brother Gizem, lost at sea 6 months ago. The ink was still fresh enough to smudge under my thumb. A sound behind me, footsteps on stone. I turned, empty treasury. Just shelves of ledgers and strong boxes stretching into shadows. The footsteps came again. Closer, the sound of mail clinking, spurs on stone. You're looking in the wrong ledger. I spun around. The voice had been right next to my ear. Nothing there. A new letter appeared on my desk. I hadn't seen it fall. The seal was black wax, not the red we used. When I broke it, the wax felt warm, fresh. The handwriting was mine. But I hadn't written this. To the masters of the temple, concerning the matter of Brother Jean's betrayal. My betrayal. I hadn't betrayed anything. The letter detailed a transaction. 10,000 bezants paid to Saracen merchants. Names, dates, locations. Things only I knew. Things I hadn't done. Yet. The letter was dated 3 months from now. More footsteps, more clinks of mail. The rustle of parchment. Letters began to fall onto my desk. One after another, each sealed in black wax. Each in my hand, each dated in the future. My fingers trembled as I opened them. Transaction records, payment ledgers, correspondence with people I'd never met, but whose names I somehow knew. All showing how I would betray my oath, how I would sell our secrets, how I would doom my brothers. Stop, I whispered to the empty room. These aren't real. As real as Brother Thierry's signature, said a voice, his voice, as real as the gold you'll take. I turned. A figure stood in the shadows. Templar armor, but black as night. Where his face should be, only darkness. You're dead, I said. I saw you die. Death doesn't release us from our oaths. More figures emerged from the shadows. More black armored Templars. More faces of darkness. But you'll release yourself from yours. I haven't done anything, not yet. Brother Guilome's voice, now, from another shadow knight. But you will. We've seen it. The letters don't lie. More papers fell. An endless stream of evidence. My future crimes written in my own hand. How can you know what I'll do? The same way we know what's in that letter you burned last week. The one from the Sultan's messenger. My blood went cold. No one knew about that. No one could know. The offer was generous, wasn't it? Thierry's voice again. Enough gold to buy a new life. All they want is information. Account ledgers, transport routes, defense plans. I didn't agree to anything. But you kept the letter, kept the seal they gave you. The one hidden under the loose stone in your cell. I reached for my sword. My hand passed through the hilt like smoke. The Shadow Knights moved closer. Their armor made no sound now. Their edges blurred, like ink in water. We guard the temple's wealth, even in death, Gigam said. Guard it from thieves, from traitors, from brothers who break their oaths. I'm not a traitor. Show us the seal. What seal? The one burning a hole in your purse right now. The one you've been carrying for 3 days, trying to decide. My hand went to my belt. The Sultan's seal was there. Heavy, hot as a coal. How did you? The letters show everything. Past, present, future. The money you'll take. The brothers you'll betray. The plans you'll sell. They surrounded my desk now. Armored figures of shadow and darkness. Dead men come to judge the living. But I can change it, I said. Now that I know, I can choose differently. Can you? A letter floated up from the desk, opened itself. Read the last paragraph. My hands shook as I read my own words. Even now, as the dead show me what I will become, I tell myself I can change it. That knowing the future means I can avoid it. I am wrong. The date was tomorrow. Free will is an illusion, brother. Tiari's voice was almost gentle now. The letters don't predict the future. They record it. What's written is written. Then why show me, so you understand why we must do this? The Shadow Knights drew their swords, blades of darkness that hurt my eyes to look at. Wait, I said. Please, check the next letter. It appeared in my hands. Tomorrow's date, my writing. They gave me a choice. Judgment or redemption. I chose the ink. Blurred, ran like water. Like tears, like blood. Choose, brother. The Shadow Knights raised their swords. Judgment or redemption. I, the seal in my purse, burned. The letters on my desk whispered their evidence. Future crimes, future betrayals, future deaths. Choose. I closed my eyes, opened them, made my choice. The Shadow Knights lowered their swords. It is written, they said. When they found me the next morning, I was slumped over my desk. The letters were gone. Only one remained. My last confession, my final testament, dated today. The Sultan's seal lay shattered beside it. In the ledgers, all the numbers added up perfectly now. No impossible sums. No transactions that couldn't exist. No signatures of dead men. But sometimes, late at night, I hear mail clinking in the treasury. Footsteps on stone. The rustle of parchment. And I know they're still watching, still guarding, still reading the letters that write themselves in darkness, waiting to see what choice the next brother will make, what choice was already written for him, what choice was written for us all.